Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Dunlap. It is 6:33 p.m. and I will welcome you to the September 19th, 2023 meeting of the Mobility and Transportation Infrastructure Commission. If you are here to submit public comment, there are some public comment cards up front if you'd like to do that. Just letting everyone know ahead of time. Liana, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Commissioner Abelson,
Here.
Chair Dunlap,
Here.
Commissioner Fisher,
Here.
Vice Chair Hughes,
Here.
and Commissioner Zavala.
Here.
You have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you, Liana. And I will ask Commissioner Zavala to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right. Please stand, face the flag, and put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
Thank you, Commissioner Zavala. Our first item on the agenda is general public comment. So these are items that are not on our agenda tonight, but are under the purview of the Mobility and Transportation Infrastructure Commission. We will, I'll ask Liana to call everyone up one by one. We will limit public comment to 3 minutes per each speaker. When you come up to the podium, there should be just push the button. There should be a red light, and you may begin. Liana, will you please call the first speaker?
Yes, the first speaker will be Nick Howell.
Hi, I'm Nick Howell, and my wife and I live at 300 Orange Grove, which was the site of the fatal crash a month ago or 5 weeks ago. We appreciate the time to be heard tonight and to understand the proceedings of the MTIC. As you'll hear from some of our neighbors who also want to speak, we are that this terrible event has led us to begin forming a group, an informal group of neighbors who are interested in identifying and pursuing and engaging with the city and with this committee and their formal processes to look for opportunities to make Orange Grove safer, but also to make the entire neighborhood safer, as you know, probably have a lot of cut through traffic that goes down Oliver and Meridian. And so there are challenges in Buena Vista throughout the neighborhood. We are very interested to understand what the committee already has in flight. Many of us are new to this equation because we were sort of really awakened to the problem with this terrible crash. And so we're interested to learn more about the pending consultant design on Orange Grove and what the objectives are for that. As a group of concerned neighbors, I think the theme you will hear is that our interest is in identifying and hoping that the city will push towards slowing down traffic. There, I'm sure, are multiple objectives that the potential redesign of the Orange Grove corridor, along with the work that's already underway with Fair Oaks and Huntington and Fremont, our concern is to see that the traffic be slowed down. And we know that there are different options that will be considered, and we want to test whether the objective can be squarely focused on slowing down traffic as opposed to increasing capacity that will accelerate the traffic. Our neighbors all have different experiences of how the speed and reckless driving at times, drunk driving, and just the general flow of traffic because of the way that with the end of the 710 freeway, with that freeway not being built, then obviously the key streets in town are absorbing a lot of that traffic, as this committee knows better than any of us. And we're concerned that we don't want to see Orange Grove become sort of a de facto replacement for the 710. And we don't want to see it continue to be the raceway that it already is. It's quite a raceway. We believe that the merge of lanes is unsafe, the way the lanes go from 2 to 1 at Oliver, and that the overall speed is unsafe as we go down. So we appreciate the time to be heard. And I think what you will see is that this group takes some structure and form in the coming weeks and months And we're looking forward to being a consistent voice for the concerns of the sort of overall neighborhood of Orange Grove and Buena Vista Prospect neighbors related to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Howell.
Our
Liana,
next
that's public
speaker
comment.
is Caroline Howe.
Good evening, Ms. Howell. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Caroline Howell, Nick's wife at 300 Orange Grove as well. I just wanted to follow on with a few things that Nick said about our group, our coalition of neighbors. We're also working with the city of Pasadena. We've already been to the City Council District, Pasadena District 6 meeting. We've convened with some neighbors that are already active on the Orange Grove corridor. And despite this rumor that people in Pasadena don't want to slow down traffic, that it's all about the flow, we've learned as we start talking to more of our neighbors up on the corridor of Orange Grove that the homeowners and the condominium owners, the people that live there, are absolutely concerned about the speed. So we hope that the city of South Pasadena can work with us as well as the city of Pasadena to look for real solutions for that to happen. I also want to make sure that I know the family, I've been involved in and been on the communications of the families of Fremont Group that has done such great work for this corridor. As I see studies coming up and meetings happening in the coming weeks for Fair Oaks and Fremont and Huntington, we need to remember that the other corridor through South Pasadena is Orange Grove. And we need to look at a holistic approach to mitigating traffic. We all want slower streets. We all want to work together. We're all part of the same neighborhood. But our neighborhood is kind of hit on both sides from Orange Grove and from Fremont. The other thing is, before we could even get here, we are all traumatized by this, horrific accident that happened. Of course, there's nothing you can do about drunk drivers. That's just beyond anyone's control. But before we could even get to this meeting, there was another accident on Sunday night on Orange Grove where another accident, a single car driver flipped over the median. So it is time. There is plenty of record that accidents are continuing to happen on Orange Grove, and there's no point in waiting any longer. I'm hoping that some near term fixes can be done to Orange Grove and the cut through in front of Oliver before we have to wait for 2-3 years of planning on that corridor. So we appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Howell. Liana, next speaker.
Rona Boards.
Good evening. You may begin.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. My name's Rona Bortz, and I live on Oliver Street, just a few houses away from the Howells, and I'm here. I don't really have much additional to say than the Howells have expressed, but I am my family and I were pedestrians, we're bicyclists. We constantly go out on Orange Grove, and it's terrifying, the speed on that road and the cut through and the stop signs there that go down from Oliver to Meridian are frequently ignored. So whatever we can do, we would love to be a part of helping with the solution. Our neighborhood group is here, and we're looking forward to some solutions. So thank you.
Thank you. Liana, our next speaker.
Beth Levinson, I'm sorry.
And then who's after that?
Nazam Hassani.
All right, great. Thank you. Yeah, it should be red. Good evening. You may begin when ready.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Beth Levinson. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share our experiences in our neighborhood with you. I live at 920 Oliver in the South Pasadena area, just kind of kitty corner from Caroline and Nick. I've only been there a year, so I'm a new resident of South Pasadena, and just in the short time I've been in this neighborhood, I have noticed quite an increase in traffic going from Orange Grove down Meridian. They blow through the stop signs. So I'm at the the T. I face Meridian. They blow through the stop sign from Oliver turning right. They just speed straight through, straight down Meridian and usually turn left onto Buena Vista. And thinking that they're trying to get to Fremont. I think that's Fremont. I walk a lot. I walk to the train in the mornings. I walk my dog about 4 or 5 times a day, and I was beeped at in the crosswalk on Meridian and Buena Vista. I've almost been hit a couple of times. I try and take my dog outside of our neighborhood. So we go up Oliver, turn right onto Orange Grove, and then try and cross over Orange Grove on Columbia to get down into the Arroyo. And that's terrifying because we get beeped at all the time there or cut off. So I really just wanted to share this with you as a new resident. We're actually a little bit concerned about our home value. So we bought during the crazy time when everyone else was trying to buy, like there were only 3 houses or something. So we are worried about property value. And with every accident and with every other person who's using our neighborhood as a cut through, we are worried about, did we make the wrong investment? So I'm very, very interested in working with you all on trying to solve these problems, make it a safer neighborhood, but we'd also like to be able to protect our investment. But definitely safe. We have a grandbaby coming up, and I'm a little bit terrified about taking this baby down our street, which was fine a year ago, really, in a stroller and trying to cross the street. So we're already thinking about, is it safe to have a baby with us in our neighborhood, which is heartbreaking. So I hope that you all hear that and will work with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker. And after this gentleman, who's next, Liana?
That would be it for public comment.
Good evening. My name is Nizam Husseini. I'm actually on the other side of the border from Pasadena. I'm in Pasadena, 268 Orange Grove, South Orange Grove, the corner of Del Mar and Orange Grove. Been there about 2 years. In that time frame, we've had 6 light posts knocked down. 2 cars ended up in my neighbor's front yard, corner of Del Mar and Orange Grove. Actually drove all the way up and hit their front doorstep. Not to mention the countless number of accidents we've had on Orange Grove. I immediately got involved with the city of Pasadena, spoke with Lieutenant Rousseau and the police chief, talked to Laura Conejo, who's in charge of traffic there. And what we decided to do, come up with a solution, was an engineering solution, because obviously having a cop parked on Orange Grove 24-hour days, 7 days a week is impossible. Although they did put police officers, but they can't be there all the time. So the engineering department, what we decided to do was, during the hours of 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., Del Mar turns red all night long. The only way it turns green is the car in Orange Grove approaches Del Mar, stops, and then after about 6 seconds, it turns green. Cars go through, turns red again immediately. So that has mitigated the speeding dramatically at my corner at nighttime from 9 to 5 a.m. From 5 to about 7, there's a little bit of speeding because everyone's rushing to get to work. And I'm trying to get that to go to 7 a.m. because the idea is when cars start approaching the intersection of Del Mar, the lights automatically change because it senses traffic on the opposing side. So it triggers Orange Grove to go through cycle. But if no one approaches Del Mar coming from the intersection, Orange Grove remains green all day long until someone comes to triggers that during the day. So I'm trying to get the city to extend those hours, which would make a dramatic difference. In scenario of South Pass, maybe that's a consideration you can do at Columbia or something, especially during the night hours, make that light turn red all night long and until the car approaches. The idea obviously is to slow traffic down, and it won't cause congestion because from the hours of 9 to 5 a.m., there's pretty much little to no traffic except speeders. Is that going to solve the problem all day long? Of course not. But during the day, as there's more traffic, it does naturally slow people down. Nighttime's a big problem and early mornings. Saturday and Sunday mornings are really a problem on Orange Grove. A lot of people are taking out their hot rods. They're racing their Corvettes, their Mustangs, going to car shows. So early morning on Saturdays, Sundays, really a problem. Maybe you might consider doing that as well to the lights. Again, not much traffic. You wouldn't cause much congestion. If any of you have been on Orange Grove and California Street, you know, that's a nightmare traffic signal. You're waiting for everyone to go, and sometimes cars are 30, 40 backed up anyway. So if you cause a little congestion on Columbia or Fremont, I don't think it would be a dramatic problem. Again, I'm just thinking of an engineering approach because it worked for us. Obviously, having police show up more often as backup to help out, obviously will help. Parking a trailer for the speed is difficult because Orange Grove is already a 2 lane, so you can't really put the trailer there. But I'm just wanted to give some ideas looking at the engineering approach, because I think it worked for us, and I'm trying to get the city of Pasadena to do it to more other streets, but maybe it's something you guys can look at too. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more public comment.
William Hoyman.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm here actually supporting my my fellow neighbors who live on Orange Grove Avenue and the environs. Speaking about the safety and traffic calming measures that we proposed along Orange Grove. Of course, some of my neighbors have experienced quite a dramatic experience recently with the fatality accident across the street. I'm over at 201 Orange Grove at Columbia and Orange Grove. I spoke over a year ago in opposition to the proposal for widening Orange Grove to 2 lanes. This is something that was considered many years ago and was actually narrowed back many years ago during Odom Stamp's administration as mayor of the city. I'm actually here speaking for more attentiveness and dedication in the city to narrowing and calming traffic on Orange Grove. I firmly believe that we should be eliminating the lane drop at Columbia, south of Columbia, southbound on Orange Grove Street Avenue, and also considering a dedicated turn lane north of us, working with the city of Pasadena to have a left turn or a right turn dedicated lane and the merge occurring north of Columbia Street, which will help mitigate some of the racing and the traffic that happens once the light turns green, with people trying to jockey for position south of Columbia Street. This is my my hope that we can work on calming traffic and mitigating some of these concerns, the noise, the speeding, the pedestrian safety issues and whatnot that we're experiencing on this important and historic corridor in our residential community. I yield the rest of my time.
Leon, sorry, I wasn't, the
It's
mic
okay.
was on. No one on Zoom?
No, we do not.
All right, great. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight and sharing your experience with Orange Grove. Certainly, my heart goes out to the Howells and just the tragedy that happened right in their house. You know, since this is a non-agendized item, we typically don't discuss it together as a commission. However, I want to ask Ted to, if he can, to come up, and I think there are some items related to the Orange Grove project, as well as Orange Grove and Columbia Avenue. If he can perhaps provide a little bit of an overview of that and next steps and how this group can be involved with that. And then also, you know, I would personally ask if you, or not personally, ask if you could, you know, I think the gentleman brings up a very practical idea regarding the timing changes and the all red that they implemented at Del Mar in Orange Grove. And if you can look to see if something like that is feasible. If I recall, the city of LA may have implemented something like that in their jurisdiction also. Seems like that would be a very low hanging fruit that we should at least explore. But Ted, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Dunlap. So yes, there in the last item for this evening, our project status update, where I review the various projects, transportation projects the Public Works Department is working on. I was going to touch on the status of the Orange Grove project. And so just to familiarize everybody with that again, about a year and a half ago, the city went through a process to appropriate its Measure M sub-regional program project. This is like regional money that a group of cities, us included, along with Burbank, Glendale, La Cañada, Flint Ridge, and Pasadena, that we share. And so the determination was made to apportion some of that money to a project along Orange Grove. The idea was to widen the street, and that was the project description that we submitted to Metro. However, when we went to the city council to review this and discuss it, the council gave us direction to evaluate the feasibility of that versus other alternatives, which ultimately would be part of our process anyway, as when we do a capital improvement project to obtain environmental clearances. And so the next step in that project is to evaluate Orange Grove and the alternatives for Orange Grove. Now, given the discussion, the comments here, and the discussion that myself and some of the staff have had with the Orange Grove residents, it would make sense for us to take a look at that scope and evaluate what other aspects of speed reduction and general transportation safety elements that we could apply in that project. And so that'll be the focus of our work in preparing the scope of that study for that project. Now, when that money was programmed, it wasn't programmed for this fiscal year, it was programmed for a later fiscal year. So there is that feasibility pre-planning work for us to do initially before there's any consideration of what this would look like or solutions or design. So it is a long process, but that's something that we can take a look at. As far as the next immediate steps, I encourage this group, just like all of our community groups across the city, to participate in the charrette process that we have starting on Monday. That project does focus on Fremont, Huntington, and Fair Oaks. But the reason that it focuses on those is because those are the major arterials in the city on which we have funding. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the other, affected and parallel streets aren't a concern in that process. Obviously, in looking at transportation networks, other streets can impact the plans we have for streets. So I know that our planning consultant would love to hear from as many diverse groups as we can in the city. And so we're hoping to set up some time with our group here next week to review their comments. So hopefully that is helpful for an update on where we are.
I think so. Thank you, Ted. And again, thank you to everyone who came
Mr.
out
Chair.
tonight.
Maybe, Ted, you could also mention that this has been on an agenda item. This commission has focused on Orange Grove, and that there had been some mitigations done as you would cross Columbia, and prior to Columbia, that we've taken some steps working with Pasadena, but there've been limitations. So with the recent incidents, though, I think it reopens that conversation where we can go back to Pasadena and talk more, because I know they've also been helping, which segues to that, is the work we've been trying to do on Columbia that flows into obviously Orange Grove and the mitigation actions we want to take there. But you could just touch on some things that have been done, but obviously with the recent accident, it didn't solve the problems.
Absolutely. So we've shared this with the group as well, that we have had some measures at the Orange Grove and Columbia intersection. We changed the markings on the north west corner. We restricted right turns on red, and we're actually trying to complete the signage for that. We did some of the work, and the rest of the work is in Pasadena, so we're trying to coordinate that. And we also have an upcoming project exclusively dealing with Columbia, that intersection, Orange Grove and Columbia, as well as Pasadena, Columbia, and Fremont, that we're working with Pasadena on. We meet with Pasadena Department of Transportation monthly, and so I've taken some notes here. We'll definitely discuss that project. Just like our project is still in its funding stage. but we could discuss some of the ideas gathered here. And we could certainly talk about the public comment about that Delmar traffic light solution with Pasadena and see how that operates and whether that's a potential solution for us in South Pasadena.
Great. Thank you, Ted. And please keep this group of residents updated every step of the way. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we'll go to our next agenda item. Commissioner Fisher, I'm going to need to borrow your agenda, which is a Slow Streets Program update. Is that you, Ted?
Yes.
All right. I'll give you a second.
Okay, we have a presentation tonight on this. So our Slow Streets program, as this commission knows, has multiple components to it. There's the residential section in which we've implemented temporary traffic calming features on 3 different streets in the city. Those streets were nominated and discussed over a long process that began, I think, in 2021. The second part of that is taking a look at Mission Street in terms of implementing a road diet to reduce the lanes on Mission Street and implement traffic calming measures. And then also promote the street as more of an open environment where we can, add parklets and areas for outdoor dining, improving the areas for outdoor dining, and then also maybe expanding that concept for other uses. So tonight we'll talk about those 3 areas. So as far as tonight's action, we're going to cover some of the Slow Street residential feedback, but there's not any action on that tonight. It's really just information. We will talk about the Mission Street reconfiguration and road diet, and we are looking for your feedback and recommendation on that. And then lastly, we'll review some of the designs for the enhanced modified parklet locations. That's really not in the purview of this commission. It's more of a community standard design process that we'll be working with another commission on, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. So yeah, I don't know if it works. Thanks, Leon. Might just have to roll to the next slide. Thank you. So in the agenda, we shared the initial snapshot view of our consultant survey results for the residential Slow Street program. This is the installations along Oak Street, Hermosa, and Grand. And so we've got about 300 survey responses, but we've only really had the program rolled out for about a month or so. So we're just sharing the initial responses in the packet. But as a summary, we've received a generous amount of feedback, both through that survey and just people sending us comments either directly through Public Works or through the city manager's office. We did receive a lot of concern from residents along Grand Avenue about the installation there. To better understand those comments that weren't submitted through the survey, they were submitted through email. We wanted to understand what that feedback was. If you look at the survey, it's geared to draw out information that we're looking to find about this, whether people like it, whether they don't like it, how do they use it, how do they experience it. And so we did hold some small listening sessions with those Grand Avenue residents to hear their experiences. What we found out was that most people who attended did not like the installation along Grand Avenue. There was a few that did, but what we're finding is the majority of support on that installation is from users of the street and not necessarily the folks who live there. So we don't have a whole picture of this just yet because really the installation's only been in for a matter of about 5 weeks or so. We want to give it more time to see how it goes. But just want to share that's the initial response for that installation. Overall, comments have shown support for the overall program across the city. I do want to share some of those statistics with you. I'm going to jump to the next slide, Liana. Thank you. So again, these are just the survey results from about the first month or so. One of our 21 survey questions, which are provided in 3 different languages, asks, overall, how do you think the demonstration strategies have impacted each corridor? So this is our kind of like, do you like it or do you not type of question. Some people have asked us if that would have been make more sense just to say, do you support this or do you not? Yes or no. We implemented that as this type of question because we wanted to be able to focus the results on a particular street. And we wanted to focus the answers on what the point of the program is, which is, making safe streets a little safer to use for active transportation and traffic calming. So you can see here, on Oak Street, Grand Street, Hermosa, pretty much people falling on both sides of the spectrum, whether it's better and safer or not as safe. Little bit of at 1 month mark, a little bit more towards the better, safer. And then about 20%, 10 to 20% of people feeling that nothing's really changed with this implementation. Next slide. We do have a feedback about the same where we asked, do you want to see this on other streets? So about 50-50, slightly in the favor of people who want to see the program, but it's really split as far as our survey results go. In a future meeting, we'll be able to really derive more information out of the survey. There's a lot of extra data we can pull based on people's responses, their written responses. We might be able to come up with some of the streets that people are asking about here, or people are recommending here. Okay, so that's all we have tonight on the residential program as far as an update goes. Very brief, just a 1 month in. I'm happy to take questions about that.
Commissioner Hughes, Vice Chair Hughes. Go
Just a really quick question, Ted, and I mentioned this to a fellow commissioner. We had said that this is going to be a 3-month trial, originally 6 months, but then I think we reversed, revised that to a 3-month potential. One of the things I want to maybe bring forth is the concern about the timing and the experience in that we started this in August. We're 1 month in or so. But we're going to have a changing dynamic with daylight savings time and it getting darker. So I'm also wondering if the value of the delineators and the reflectors and everything that's there will show more value as we get dark. Because when it's 4 o'clock and children are out and it's December, is a different experience than August at 4 o'clock with when we put the delineators in. So I don't know whether it helps us to keep in mind whether we want to come back and ask for a survey as we go through these experiences as people, go through those test areas, pilot areas at different times of the year, and how those elements that have been installed, how they could be affecting the traffic flow and people's safety and reaction if we get a different metric based on different timing, because of those changing conditions.
Thanks for that comment, Vice Chair Hughes. So to clarify, and I know this has been, there's been, various interpretations of this. We had intended to do a 6-month evaluation given the amount of time and investment the city's made in this project. Because of the early feedback we've received, the thought is that we will do a check-in and a thorough evaluation of what's happening at 3 months. I don't think that will necessarily mean that the whole program will end at 3 months. We may continue, but it will be an opportunity for us to really look at the parts that are working versus the parts that we feel might not be working. So I don't think that we will end the program at 3 months, but it's certainly a good time for us to do a check-in and reveal that. So with that said, 3 months puts us in about November timeline for the project. And then the 6 months would put us into, early 2024. So I think there will be an opportunity to see it over a longer period of time. one of the reasons to do a 6-month evaluation is because it's temporary equipment and it really just doesn't last that long. We have to continually repair it. But that's the idea. Permanent installations would cost a lot more money and be a lot longer term. So I don't know if we'll get a whole, 4 seasons type of evaluation, but our hope is that we will get a longer time, at least for some of the components. So that's a good comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Abelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank the residents of Orange Grove and Oliver for coming tonight. The safety of that street is something I bring up, if not every meeting, every other meeting. So I appreciate your showing up. On the survey, just 2 quick logistic questions. First, are most of the results that we're receiving through folks scanning that QR code on the yard sign, or is it just, it's pretty equal, various different channels and methods?
So the QR code just leads to a link, and we have that link available on our website, and we've provide that link. So we don't know necessarily how we get them. But there are a couple survey questions about, that try to apportion out who is who, like what are they doing on the street? Do they live there? That type of thing.
Okay, great. And then the other question is, or comment, it would be great if the city would send out reminders through City Scoop or its other channels and methods, reminders to the community to submit their feedback, because I think what often happens is you'll get feedback from a certain core active group, but the others who are good with it or don't have any particular objection or concern just sort of let it go. And I think if the city is reminding people, hey, this is an important survey, please submit your feedback, that might be helpful. Because we've used it for we're using it for other methods like the renter survey and things like that. And I think it might be a helpful tool and good reminder, because I'm ashamed to admit that I had not submitted a response to the survey, right? So I think it might be helpful just to make sure we give everybody as much opportunity to provide input as possible, whatever their view is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Abelson, and we know your opinion on it. So that's a really good.
You
Commissioner
think you
Fisher?
did.
Thank you. Before I talk about the Slow Streets project, I did want to mention that I heard some interesting ideas. I can't comment on a project directly, but I think it is an interesting comment. Why not have this signal at Columbia and Orange Grove operate as a rest and red operation during many hours of the day? It operates in a more simplistic fashion now, where it's the same time throughout the day period. They added a leading pedestrian interval a few years ago, and that was helpful. But I think that is an interesting thought. That way, if you have a detector in the roadway, and they don't have any today, you would have to stop at the stop line to place your call to get the green. Then you could get your green, but you can't get your green when you're 150 foot away. So I think that's an interesting thought. And when I was with Los Angeles, we had similar projects where we implemented that type of operation. One example is Sunset Boulevard through the Bel Air area that has curvy roads, winding roads through the Santa Monica Mountains. And we had one in particular where the curve through the intersection was just too tight, and we had to have traffic slow down and place the call before they got the green. So I think that's something that could be considered. The other thing I think that could be considered is, and I'd never really thought of this in terms of cars, but when I go on my walks, I will walk, from a Jones Coffee up to Meridian, Oliver, Columbia, and back home again. But yes, I guess it is a neighborhood issue if drivers are taking Orange Grove to Oliver to Meridian as a bypass route. And I know that the Public Works Department is going to consider neighborhood traffic management projects. And it would seem that that would be a project that it would involve everyone who lives between Columbia and Grevillea. So, that's something that could be considered for the future. when the new project is undertaken. With regard to the Slow Streets project, Ted, have you received any comment about elements of the Slow Street project in the residential neighborhood, specifically about do you need a yellow center line to go with the striping for the bikes?
We have received comments about yes, on Grand Avenue, when we had our listening session, there was a general concern, and this is just from the attendees, that a yellow center line would be added to Grand Avenue. We explained that was not part of our plan to add that to Grand Avenue. And in fact, we removed the yellow center line. I don't know that we had a lot of people notice, but we removed the yellow center line on part of the Hermosa Street section that we felt, even apart from the Slow Streets project, wasn't appropriate in that residential neighborhood to have that yellow. I think it was a double center line there. So
the reason why I ask is someone who lives on Grand Avenue asked me about it, and I got to thinking I could not identify anywhere in the manual on uniform traffic control devices that it requires a yellow center line with bike lanes. On the other hand, I've never seen a bike lane project without a yellow center line, because you have to make sure that you're staying to the left of the bike lane so that you give them their room. And then, but also you have to make sure you don't go over the physical center of the roadway. So I just bring that up as something that I think should be considered. Also, have you received any feedback of where someone might give you their opinion of the project in general along Grand Avenue? They may like the separate bike lane or whatever, but they don't like the vertical delineators at the corners that are supposed to simulate bump outs.
we've received a combination of comments that they, whether we have those, however we want to refer to them, but the delineators, the curb extensions, a variety of comments about some people don't necessarily like the way they look. Others are concerned with the way they narrow the street. They feel like it creates a tight space. That's a difficult comment to address, because that's kind of the point of that curb extension, is to create that narrow space to slow traffic down. When we bring this item back, we'll be able to give you a breakdown of the thoughts around different comments, because through this 300 responses we received, we did receive a lot of narrative information that we kind of have to comb through and see what people are saying. But just verbally, and some of the emails we've received, we have had some complaints about the use of delineators. But in other locations, we've had some positive comments about the delineators, about how people feel a bit safer when they're crossing, when the delineators are there. So it's kind of a mix.
Okay, and finally, many of us know that Grand Avenue is used by a lot of bike riders on the weekends. They make good use of it. What was my question about that? Regular bike users. Do we have any way of assessing what the bike community likes? Do they like it? Do they find it restrictive? Do they find it makes them feel safer? If we hear from the residents, somehow we need to hear from the bike community.
So 2 comments on that. We have heard from cyclists, and so we see that through the survey, because we asked what the type of use is. And then in just our general promotion of the survey and the system, we've been encouraging people, including cyclist groups, to provide their comments. Not just whether they like it or not, or whether it's effective, because when you're a cyclist, you are able to provide feedback on certain patterns and configurations about whether it makes it easier for you to navigate or not. So we're looking for those comments as well. So we're doing our best, and that's one of the reasons it's best to have, several months for digestion of this, because we really need to get a lot of feedback to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, I have a couple of different comments to make, and maybe a couple of questions too. You might have, I'm actually one of the people who, like, I put a little bit of my time to helping with this project. You might have seen me out there, swinging the hammer. But one thing that I've started to notice kind of, from the beginning to now is I noticed that the sort of questions about like function over form, I think that they're very important. Or like some of the concerns about that as well. Like, I've had many different conversations with neighbors while I've been out there. Some of them like, very constructive, some of them a little bit more, with some frustrations. And I think that all of the feedback is really necessary and it's all very important. And I guess the way that I've sort of, my perspective about this has been, while sort of helping to put the tape down or helping to put the delineators up, my perspective is that this is certainly a really interesting conversation starter for the city, for the community, and for the neighbors, because it brings a lot of questions about what could the future of the safety in our city look like, right? And I guess one of the things that I wanted to sort of talk about was, is there any sort of data that shows what kind of voters, like their age grouping or anything like that? Was there any sort of information about that?
We don't have that type of breakdown in the survey.
Oh.
It's mostly identifying, whether people live here, work here, what type of mode of transportation are they using, that type of thing.
Right, because I guess one of the things that I notice is that there's a lot of seniors who like to walk around, and then there's also a lot of, for the most part, the majority of it is kids using these streets, because as per the selected streets, you guys, selected some really good streets to start this conversation. Of course, you have Oak, where you have the a really solid straight line that goes to the middle school, and then also to the high school. And I think that one of the things that I've also had, like, people ask me about, I think, was like, why are we using like tape? Because it looks like it like kind of just comes up, and it like just it seems very flimsy. Like, people feeling like it's like the perception of it is, it's like it's very flimsy or it doesn't really work. Um, in the conversations that I've had, I've sort of said, like, with emphasis that it is a temporary project. I guess one of the things I've been saying is like, this really is just supposed to be a conversation starter. And I guess one of the things that comes along with it being a temporary project is that it may not have the same impact as, or visual impact as, say, like a permanent project. Say like, one of the roads that comes to mind is like Fletcher, where Fletcher has that island in the middle with a tree. And so I've had some talks with some neighbors over there, and right there on Fletcher and Oak, there's that yellow inner, like, middle of the street. It's kind of like the V. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the official term, but it's, what's the name of the, I call it like the construction, the architecture.
Oh,
Median?
Is it
yeah,
just a median?
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
just basically immediate,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Because just checking. Yeah, because I guess one of the things that I noticed with that was that some people were, some of the neighbors that were talking, like, the homeowner on Fletcher and Oak, like that very corner. They came out of the house to talk to me a little bit. One of the things that they notice is that they still see people kind of just drive through them sometimes, and they just, don't care. But then they feel like the permanent median that they have on Fletcher has a different impact. And, just, that's just one thing that comes up in the conversations. And yeah, I guess I just wanted to sort of bring up a little bit of that, make a little bit of a comment. But thank you so much for your time.
Ted, I guess help me understand, and thank you for, I saw we got emailed a public comment on this and we'll go to public comment in a second, I think, once we go through your entire presentation. Mr. Siegel emailed a public comment talking about the people he talked to, and I think it's two categories. And can you help me understand the breakdown of, is it this is ugly, we don't want this on our street, or there's some sort of safety concern? Like, do you have a breakdown of those? Like the people who oppose it, is it mostly aesthetic?
There's a variety of comments. I think,
Right.
when we bring this to you and kind of go through it, there will be all sorts of interesting comments. But they both and all, there's, some people are concerned about the aesthetic. Some people don't feel that it achieves what it's intended for as
Okay.
far as safety and calming. There's a variety of comments about people's rejection of the installations.
And I mean, as far as aesthetics, it's what, a 6-month, or originally planned to be a 6-month pilot, and that would be addressed if it were put permanent. It would be put in some sort of aesthetically pleasing format, right? Like,
Yeah, of course. I mean, a permanent installation would feature concrete and asphalt and planters and things like that.
okay,
The idea here is to basically geometrically
mhm,
set up the street in such a way that it would be permanently at a very low cost.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So one day if you were to construct permanent curb extensions, you've kind of tested them out,
That's
what
the
turning
idea,
radius
yeah.
should be and how far it should go out into the roadway, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you keeping data on ones that are getting hit
We are
routinely? Like, I'm thinking that in your permanent design or your permanent program, if a corner
as
is
best
getting
as
hit.
we can, we're trying to make those notes so that we can, have some sort of sense of what is going on in that particular location.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of questions about the data collection process and comparing, existing conditions to, the post installation conditions. We're doing a lot of that for the Mission Street section. The very nature of the residential slow streets was supposed to be a quick build, a cheap, quick way to see if we could make some changes that would work. And it's really driven by community acceptance. If we had done this very overarching analysis of the system, that's a possibility, but be very expensive and drawn out. That's usually something that we would do when planning for a capital improvement project. That this is not what that is. This is to very early, inexpensively see what the reaction would be to this installation.
Great. I hope that helps assuage some of the concerns that the goal is not to keep these delineators out in the street for years and years and years on end, right? It's a
That's correct, yeah.
It's a pilot period that has a fixed end, and based on that, that design will be used to inform perhaps a permanent project down the road when funding is available.
Yeah, and it's not to say that the tools that we're using, delineators, paint, tape, can't be used for, semi-permanent installations. We do that at different locations in the city. That's part of the experience here. It's just that these aren't intended for that. If we find that one particular location really is well served from just delineators and tape, most likely paint. The tape is a temporary thing, for many reasons, as Commissioner Zavala had mentioned. But yeah, that's a potential tool that we could use. We've done that in other locations.
Great.
So we basically we weigh the maintenance of that versus the benefit of it. And if the benefit, prevails, then it's a tool we can use.
Okay. I'll let you proceed.
Sure,
with the rest
of
of your
course.
presentation.
Okay, so wrapping up the component about the residential slow streets program, I'll move on to the Mission Street section. So those of you that are not familiar, we started this work in 2021. It was grant funded at the time. we had a break in terms of, contractually and funding and staff resources. So we resumed the work last year. So we're actually referencing a traffic study that was done by Terrace in 2021, which is informing the design that we'll be looking at tonight. So Iteris was focusing on multiple things. Building a model of Mission Street. And with that, some statistics on Mission and Meridian. Those are our average daily traffic volumes there on the screen. But there was two things that the study was trying to accomplish. Looking at the feasibility and the impacts of closing Meridian Avenue between Mission Street and El Centro, where currently for example, the farmer's market takes place on Thursday night, that area, seeing what would impact the closure. And then the other part of that was, reduction of lanes on Mission Street, which we'll talk about in a moment. So overall, the high level findings, and we have the incomplete study in the agenda. Iteris found that the closure would result in increased delay on particularly Fremont Street. But in your packet, you'll see that there's delays on other streets as well. And it would obviously reduce volume along Meridian Avenue because you're cutting out a section of it. It did have a potential to improve the intersection operations, but that's just at Mission Meridian. And that's somewhat obvious because it basically cuts off one leg of the intersection. And so the rest of the intersection would enjoy, a higher level of service because it's missing a leg. So
Ted,
oh, yes.
clarification. You point out that if it's a three-legged intersection, that would improve operations. But is there an analysis of it being a four-legged intersection as well as being a three?
Yes. So I think that analysis comes into play on the next part of the study where they take a look at Mission Street as a whole. On the next slide, I'll show you that they ran a couple different scenarios, which did include Mission Meridian as a four-way as it is now. So that's a good question. Ultimately, Iteris found that closure on Mission Meridian did have impacts in the surrounding area. It would not necessarily impact Mission itself. And their summary findings were that they didn't detect many end-to-end trips on Mission. The vehicles that were on Mission were going somewhere on Mission. And that at least at Iteris's evaluation, that Mission is technically below capacity with its 10,000 vehicles. And so therefore, altering Mission Meridian wouldn't impact Mission itself. So this seems like it's kind of a mixed conclusion, but ultimately, as you'll see in the design, we opted not to close Mission Meridian as part of the project. We can talk about that more.
So for the benefit of those listening, there are several scenarios that you're about to walk us through, right? And this is scenario one, which includes closing Meridian.
I'm gonna tweak basically, but I'm gonna tweak that a little bit.
Okay.
What Iteris did was they evaluated two different. I'm not gonna call them scenarios, so I don't want to confuse people.
Okay.
But I'm getting there. They had two different evaluations. One was the closure of Mission Meridian just on its own. Then they ran 4 scenarios on Mission Street, some of which or I think at least one of them included the Mission Meridian closure. So yes, there are scenarios that they ran. And to preface everything tonight, this is what Iteris did in 2021 that informed the design we'll show you now. We have not done additional modeling on the design we're going to show you yet. We have that funding in our budget. We intend to run additional modeling, but we want to take we want to take a pause and show you where we are so we get some feedback and make some decisions before we spend all of our modeling money on something that the commission isn't recommending. So This is the table, and I know this is a lot of data, but I'll quickly summarize this for you. These are the intersections that were in the study. So it starts off there at Mission Street and Fair Oaks, goes through Mission Street, El Centro, Fair Oaks, Fremont, Meridian, all the way to Orange Grove, because the project delineation is Fair Oaks to Orange Grove on Mission. And it basically looks at the level of service, just like your exam. A is a good grade. C, D, E and F, we start to think that this is not, and this is for the layman out there, that's not a good level of service. That's a failing level of service. So what we're looking at here in this table is what's the level of service in the existing situation, both in the morning and the evening, what we call the AM peak hour and the PM peak hour. And then when we close Meridian, what happens? And so you can see there's not much of a difference. Where you're a C in the, let's say for the first intersection on there, where you're a C in the morning and a D in the evening, you're still a C in the morning and a D in the evening with Mission Meridian closed. Really, the key is to look at the columns that have that are highlighted. Where it's blue, you have a better situation, a reduction in delays. Where it's orange, you have an increase in delays. And so what happens generally is you get delays on Fremont Avenue as a result of closing that section of Meridian, which makes sense because that north-south traffic goes somewhere else. So let me jump to the next section here. Let's talk
Ted,
about, oh,
I'm
yes,
sorry,
yes.
sorry, Mr. Chair. Was Orange Grove?
Yes, Orange Grove is on there. So let's go down to numbers. You can see numbers 4, 8, and 13. You can see that in some cases, like Orange Grove and Mission Street, there's not a negative impact. And that's basically because the configuration really hasn't changed much at Orange Grove and Mission Street. But at Orange Grove and El Centro and Orange Grove and Monterey, you have a slight reduction. You have a slight delay because again, you have traffic diverted from El Centro and Meridian. And then, so that moves to Fremont and Orange Grove. Fremont got it worse according to the evaluation, but you do have some impacts on Orange Grove.
Thank you.
Ted, can I ask a question?
Yes.
In looking at the delays today, does that consider the random delay from the light rail trains?
It does, yeah. And so when Iteris modeled this, they considered what was happening, the timing of the rail based on the counts and the modeling at that intersection.
The reason why I ask is because I recall a few years ago when another consultant prepared an analysis of Meridian and Mission. The result of that study was that we recommended that we have no right turn during the peak hour on Mission, so that there's one good moving lane on Mission at Meridian. But on the average, for each train that goes by, there's an average of 90 seconds of random delay. Sometimes it's only 20 seconds. Sometimes it's 2 minutes because just the randomness of northbound and southbound trains. So I've often said that the intersection of Mission Meridian is the second most congested one in the city, at least at 5 o'clock. I'm looking at these numbers and it doesn't seem to reflect the 90 seconds for each train that goes by. So I just want to make sure that these numbers are indeed considering the delay from the light rail.
Sure. We could dive into that a little bit and look with Iteris and see. So what I'm hearing is that you would expect the level of service to be much lower at that location. Okay. Okay, that's a good comment. Right, they're waiting. Yeah. Understood.
Sure. Ted, what do you, based on your presentation, what are we looking at? 45
So-
minutes? Would you rather us hold questions or?
It's up to you. We do have lots to cover tonight. That's gonna be so if this is the section I had
Commissioner
about,
Hughes, quick
yeah,
question?
A quick question.
yeah,
The study reflects 2021 data, correct?
yes.
So do we have concerns, or has Iteris thought there would be any shift that we need to consider because this is pandemic?
We-
And that we've had a change in traffic, even the metro was running less trains during this period. So
Ted,
that
do
would
you want to
be a
answer?
factor too.
Yeah, of course.
You understand.
So the data was collected in October 2021. So it's kind of like end of that timeline. However, like I mentioned, this was to inform some of the, design decisions that we're considering now. We still have modeling capacity with Iteris for the final project. So, anything we do would be recent in terms of when we actually implement this.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll jump to the next slide, and we're going to talk about the larger part of the study, which is the scenarios in reconfiguring Mission Street. So Iteris looked at 4 scenarios. They looked at reducing Mission from 4 lanes to 2 lanes without modifying storage, meaning without changing the way that cars make turns, the turning pockets at the intersections. So after doing that evaluation, they quickly determined that this was not necessarily going to work unless they did change how the turning systems worked at the various intersections. So their second scenario was to do the lane reduction and then extend the turn lanes at the critical locations and to reconfigure the intersection Orange Grove Avenue. And the reason that was important was because since the Mission lane reduction in this initial evaluation went all the way to Orange Grove goes from 4 lanes on Orange Grove to 4 lanes on Mission to 4 lanes on Orange Grove and 2 lanes on Mission. So you have to reconfigure all the different left and right turns so that they line up just generally. So that's what that second scenario took a look at. Then they did a scenario, basically scenario 2, but with the Meridian closure. And so you're seeing with and without the Meridian closure. And then the last scenario they did was our really initial take on the project, which in 2021, we had some Mission Street plans, which really the only difference in that scenario 4 from the preceding scenarios was that we didn't reconfigure Orange Grove at Mission. Instead, we moved the lane drop closer to Meridian. And that's what's reflected in the current design. That by the time if you're traveling westbound, by the time you get to Orange Grove, you're back to what it looks like today, if that makes sense. Hopefully you're following me here. I know this is a lot of material. It can be a little complicated. So key findings from this evaluation. Iteris recommended minimal change to the Fair Oaks Mission intersection. And that is because there's already a lot of queuing, turning, and storage needed at Fair Oaks and Mission where it interacts. And narrowing the street right there, besides its safety concerns, which I'll talk about in a moment, really causes a disruption. So the recommendation was that the lane drop should begin west of Mound. Now we've talked about this before, that it's it's difficult to do the lane drop right at Fair Oaks anyway, because of people who are traveling westbound. They need some time to understand that there's a lane drop, just the reaction of the driver. And that's why also another reason why it makes sense to move the lane drop west of Mound. The study talked a great deal about turn pockets. That's what came out of scenario 2, in that not lengthening turn pockets really disrupts the level of service, especially at the Fremont location. So you'll see in the design that turn pockets have been lengthened at the critical intersections as opposed to what they are right now. So generally I found that in the scenarios 2, 3, and 4, which is expanding turn pocket storage, Mission Street really wasn't affected. And just like we spoke about earlier, the Meridian closure, whether or not it's part of the final design, doesn't really impact Mission itself. So again, I'm just kind of repeating here, but the study does a lot of evaluation if you look at the tables about the queuing and stacking at various intersections and how that impacts the level of service. And then there was a comment about generally, with slower speeds in this configuration and improved safety conditions along the corridor, and allows for multimodal use, pedestrian and cycling usage, which is kind of the whole point of the project. So I'll quickly look at these scenarios, not to spend too much time on them, but this is scenario 2. So going back to what we talked about where blue, white is really no change. Blue is a reduction in delay, and yellow is an increase in delay. In scenario 2, you're seeing delays at Mission and Fremont, Mission and Meridian, Mission and Orange Grove. See the Diamond too. But it should point out that these are really small. I mean, even though we've highlighted them, Mission and Diamond, it says, I should correct this. It says VC at the top, which is volume to capacity, but I think these are actually in seconds because I think there's a mistake in the study, which I have to confirm. But you're looking at like a 0.2 second delay at Diamond. So even though there's a delay, it's almost 0. So you're not looking at really significant changes here. Scenario 3 is on the next slide. And again, this is scenario 2 with, I'm sorry, let me go back here.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Super quick, about the Mission Fremont, because I see that has the highest delay out of all the streets, and operationally today, the curbside lane, when you're eastbound curbside lane, so in front of the empty Christmas tree / pumpkin lot,
Sure.
there's you don't have there's not a right turn lane, and you have a significant number of people turning right, and you have pedestrians in that crosswalk. So today, a lot of times that's in effect one lane because there's a driver blocking the right turn lane. I mean, the number 2 lane, because they can't make it right on Fremont because of pedestrians or whatever reason. Is that captured in here?
Yeah, and actually, I think there was a recommendation that would provide, the lane reduction would provide an opportunity for a right turn enhancement there. I think that's what you're saying.
I think I'm saying in the existing conditions, right? Does it account for that? No, the number 2 lane. Right now you have 2 through lanes eastbound, but the number 2 lane is blocked because the person making a right turn is usually yielding to a pedestrian there in that crosswalk. So I'm saying, does the calculation of the existing condition kind of account that the operation today is really not fully 2 lanes, right? Like it's kind of like 1.5, because sometimes that second lane is blocked by a vehicle sitting there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in the existing level of service, I think it's somewhat captured to show that it's not optimal already. As far as what can be done about it, I have to double check, but I feel like there was a very brief discussion in the study about, the lane drop providing opportunity to address that service issue with a right turn, with a east to south turn.
Yeah, I think probably the point I'm trying to get at is like it shows the highest delay there,
Mhm.
and I wonder if
How much of that delay is?
I wonder if that intersection today is really operating at a C and B during the AM and PM peak, or if that's more like
Because of the
real
impact
world,
of
because
that.
of, you know,
Yeah.
pedestrians and blocking, if that's really operating like a D and D or something like that, but.
To
you
your
can-
point, Mr. Chair, one of the issues is a lot of people then were gonna go into that curb lane because they know that's the lane that'll let them go cross Fair Oaks if they want to go there or make the right-hand turn onto Fair Oaks. Whereas the one lane, it becomes your left-hand turn only lane.
Yeah, anyway, I'll let you proceed unless.
No, noted. I think that's something to bring up.
Can I add on to that? I recall that is one of the reasons why the old Public Works Commission had recommended and the city adopted having no right turn during peak hours on eastbound Mission Street at Meridian because of the number of pedestrian activities and the blockage that would cause. But that raises a larger issue. With the numbers we have here, again, algorithms were used, models were used, and we understand that, and there's standard models that reflect the input data. But what I'm asking is, has any attempt been made to calibrate these results with what you see out in the field? In other words, if you say delays only 13 seconds, is that about what you're getting, or is there a world of difference? And I just think if we're going to believe these numbers, there should be some attempt to calibrate what is really happening and to see if these numbers can be validated.
Understood. Yeah, in this effort, there wasn't a calibration effort, but I understand that that could be a preferred strategy moving forward to see if this is still what's happening. Well, not just still what's happening, but if what was observed can be observed realistically in terms of, you know, if you're driving through the intersection.
Yeah, because these numbers suggest that there won't be much of a difference. You blink your eye, you won't really notice anything. And my gut tells me that that may not be that way.
Thank you. So in looking at, you know, as we discussed, there's not too much of a change here in terms of delay on scenario 3. And again, scenario 4, which I think is the next slide, wouldn't be expected to be too much of a difference because really all this is doing is changing the configuration at Orange Grove and Mission. So you see yeah, you see your largest change there at Mission and Fremont. I'm sorry. There was the scenarios are compounded. So whatever delays you'll see in Mission and Fremont on the earlier scenarios are going to be compounded to the final scenario because they're adding on the change at Mission and Orange Grove. If that makes sense.
What change at Mission and Orange Grove?
So I'm trying to explain. Sorry, this is a difficult thing to try to put in terms everyone can understand. Scenario 4 builds on the earlier scenarios, and the only change in scenario 4 is that instead of ending the lane drop at Orange Grove, it ends the lane drop east of Orange Grove towards Meridian, so that there's not a change to the Orange Grove and Mission intersection. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's on this table 7 that is in the packet here. Shows the meridian.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. So if you look in that packet, I should have probably added that to the intersection. There's a image of what changes at Orange Grove. And it's just like Commissioner Fisher had said, it's basically taking the dual turn lanes and converting them for a 4-to-2 scenario.
And then Ted, what these are saying here is Meridian Avenue closure, but we've already said that we're not going to close Meridian because of it will impact.
Yes.
But these are based on closing.
Well, scenario 3 takes into consideration of adding the Meridian closure, and this is where it's a little confusing. It impacts Meridian, but it doesn't really impact Mission. And so in the scenarios we're looking at here, we're looking at what the lane drop does on Mission. So really adding in the meridian closure doesn't really impact Mission either way.
Okay.
But to your point, we opted not to include the meridian closure because of what it does on Meridian. So these are all Mission scenarios.
Ted, quick question. When
Yes.
you say impacts Meridian, we're talking about Meridian south of Mission primarily. Is that the focus of that impact?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should say it impacts Fremont and a tiny bit of Orange Grove. It doesn't, it actually impacts Meridian in a positive way, south.
South.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
yes. Okay, so I'm gonna jump to the next slide. And again, there's a lot to digest. We're gonna piecemeal this out. So if you have further comments later on, this is not the last time you'll be seeing this information. We do have more modeling work to do. Okay, so let's talk about the design.
Hey,
So
Ted, sorry, I'm
yes, yeah.
the design you're about to show us. Which scenario is this?
So this is the design that resulted of all the information from the scenarios, meaning that what we learned from the scenarios. Thank you for the segue on this. What we learned from the scenarios is that we need to expand the left turn pockets, especially at those critical intersections like Fremont. We learned that a reduction from 4 lanes to 2 lanes is feasible, doesn't change the level of service that much as long as you extend those turn pockets. We learned that the meridian closure doesn't necessarily impact Mission, so it's possible, but it does have other impacts that are undesirable, so we left it out of the design. Now, apart from those things, we have existing parklets that we want to preserve. We want to add additional spaces. We have RRFBs that are going to be installed. So all of that information was considered in this design.
Sorry, will we be able to go page by page, or do you want to go through all 4 pages and then go back to discussion?
However you want to do it, we can go page by page. There's only
Let's do a quick overview
quick
of
overview.
the entire
Yeah, sure thing.
street, and then we can come back and go page by page.
Sure. So on the top here, we're starting on the west end. You can see Orange Grove and Mission. Again, based on the scenarios we ran, we did not alter Mission and Orange Grove. It stays the same. The lane drop begins, you can see on the top right side of the page, closer to as you approach Meridian. So as you approach Meridian, the study also advised on how to do the lane drops, meaning like how they should be implemented. So one of the advisements was that the lane drop on this side should start as as basically removing the number 1 lane. And so that expands on the bottom here as you start to approach Mission and Meridian. Now, I'll say that our initial goal was to add to green the medians that we were creating in this effort. So we had intended to add plants and planters and do other things in a temporary way on new medians. And when we're talking about median, I'm talking about that little yellow hatched area with the black dots. In the evaluation, Alta found, and Alta is our design engineer, that the vertical elements of planters would cause a sight distance issue for people who are turning from driveways. And so what they've got on the plan right now is just delineators. It's a bit boring, but just like the residential slow streets program, that would outline the location for a future permanent median if this is successful and the city wants to adopt a permanent change to Mission. Again, this is not a capital improvement project. This is a temporary reconfiguration of Mission to see if it will work, just like the residential programs. And this is what they're recommending. So you'll see that as a lane drop, they've expanded the median to cover that area. They've preserved the left turn lane as you approach Meridian there.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Question, regarding the planters, have there been any considerations of where those could be like made use of in this project? Or-
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I think you'll
Houston-
get to that later on, right?
Yeah, we'll
Oh,
get
my
to
bad.
it later
Okay,
on,
then I'll
but
wait.
yeah,
I'll wait.
no problem. So as you're approaching, you cross Meridian on the right bottom there, you can see the blue areas. And we have, light blue is designating, existing parklets. Dark blue would be new parklet areas. So these are light blue because we have existing parklets there. So you have your existing parklets and you have, a lane reduction there. So you have, two, westbound lanes, but only one eastbound lane. Any,
Next
let me
page.
go to the next page.
Let's go
Yes,
through the whole
go to the
thing,
next page.
then we can come back.
And so on the top there, you can see one scenario is that we actually expand the parklet on the south side that right now has got, I think, two parallel parking spots. One possibility is to actually expand that parklet through all the way. You'll notice at Diamond and Mission, this is where one of the RFBs are going. So we had a concern about the visibility of that new RRFB with the parklet there. So one of the initial designs actually had the parklet pushing out into the street quite a ways and therefore pushing the median up. But we've actually reduced that and expanded the median size because we are concerned about visibility of that future
Are you talking
RRFB.
about the one slightly east of Diamond?
Yes, exactly. So where it's kind of like two colors of blue, we've narrowed that in this design where, initial designs, it was much wider.
So the arrow location, basically.
Exactly, right in front of Arrow. Yep. And so on the west side of that, in basically picking up the size and the placement of the lane, we have another potential future parklet that we could add because we have space there from the lane drop. So there's a potential parklet there on the west side of Diamond in the dark blue, and then we've added 45-degree parallel parking, and this is basically in front of the school parking lot. What's currently the school parking lot. On the bottom drawing, you'll see that, again, we have the lane drop, we have additional diagonal parking, and we have a potential location for a new parklet. And that, I think, is in front of the Chamber of Commerce and the South Pasadena right there. So that might be a good location. Doesn't require outdoor dining, but might be a good spot for some other public use. And then as we get to the moving farther east, it's hard to see on the screen, but if you have the drawing in front of you, you can see we have expanded and lengthened the turn pocket for Fremont Avenue.
Ted, on Fremont, quick question. We know that we had discussions about the new development that's going in the Caro space. And there was an issue at one point that the service entrance, which was going to be entered going northbound on Fremont, having to make a left-hand turn into it if you were coming from the south. And then are we taking that into consideration in all of the entrances for that development as we look at this configuration for Fremont and Mission?
So the residential entrance is now on
Sit on the back, right?
well, there's a service entrance on the back on Hope. And then there's a residential entrance on
Mission?
Fremont.
On
No, there's
Fremont.
no entrances on Mission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the concern though, then, if it still goes back, if it's the residential entrance on Fremont, are we gonna have a problem with them backing, because we know Fremont, very busy north-south, that they're gonna want to make left-hand turns into that, which is gonna back everybody up and back them into Mission and then cross, from both, and then Fremont itself backed up.
So I guess it's a two-part answer. The data that was collected was predated the traffic evaluation for 815 Fremont. It is a scenario that we could run now, understanding what we have the trip data for 815 Fremont, so we could provide it to Iteris to include in their evaluation. There was only about, I'm just guessing here because it's been a while, but I feel like there was only a net of like 60 trips, something very small, because 815 Fremont is a very small development that got added. And so there really was an impact to there was no significant impact to the level of service at Fremont and Mission from that project. But we could consider that in the evaluation.
Thank you.
Ted, sorry, quick question.
Sure.
How many lanes are there traveling eastbound on Mission at Fremont on the west leg? We have the left turn lane.
Just one.
Four. And then are there 2 through lanes?
Oh,
there?
sorry. Eastbound, no. It's one lane. That dotted line, I think, is supposed to represent where the current lane is.
So you've got 1 through lane eastbound Mission at Fremont.
Yes.
And that's the location that our chair was describing earlier.
Yeah,
Okay,
at the moment,
But
yeah.
got it.
So but there's no, you haven't created a right-hand turn pocket, or have you?
No, not under this design.
Let's keep going and then
Yeah.
we'll come back page
No
by page.
problem. So again, on the west side of Fremont, the turn pocket has been expanded. And then we're getting to the end here. So you have the lane drop concludes at Mound. And there is two-way turn lanes throughout. I mean, that was an early question, was where do we allow two-way turning because of the numerous driveways along Mission? And so we were trying to take a balanced approach with not really restricting people. Like, if you can imagine, if we had just put in a median all the way along Mission, anyone on the north side can only travel west, and anyone on the south side can only travel east. We wanted to avoid that. And so we do have quite a number of stretches that have two-way turn lanes, but it's not in the entirety of the street. And so you can see here, this is where the lane drop happens at Mound. You have the existing parklet at Shiro's on the south side. But again, as the study recommended, no real changes to the configuration between Mound and Fair Oaks on Mission. Finally, looking at Meridian on the bottom right corner here, it's a little, segment. No closures there, but we could add additional parking at Meridian by adding diagonal parking there on the west side of the existing median. You can see it there on the top of the median. Okay, that's the whole
All right,
design.
maybe let's go back to page 10, right? Is that the first page? Oh, no, page 10 is written on the PDF. That's page 9. There we go. And I guess we'll go down the line. Is that the best way? Sure. Commissioner Zavala?
Yeah, the only question that I had was just about the material that we're not going to be using there, which was the planters. That's pretty much it. But if it's going to be
Sure.
just-
So as we'll get into a little bit later in the presentation about the parklets, we would be using them throughout the parklet system. If we don't use them here on the street, there's other locations we could use them because, we're focusing on the road diet here, but really this is supposed to be an enhancement of Mission Street and maybe other streets in terms of like their openness and usability. So there's places that we could greenify with those parklets in other parts of the city, even, on sidewalks, on corners and things like that. So there's opportunities for those.
Awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you. With regard to the comments of extending the storage area for the left turn pockets, that's a good idea. But if you have a queue that's, let's say, 150 feet long and your storage is only 3 or 4 cars, you're going to be sitting in the through lanes because you can't reach the left turn lane. So it is ideal to have the left turn pocket length be equal to or greater than the queue length in each of the lanes. That way you can get into it and not be stuck behind vehicles. On the north side of Mission Street, just west of Meridian, you show angled parking. I think 4 spaces are shown. If I'm wrong, correct me.
No, that's correct.
Okay. I looked yesterday and there are 4 parallel spaces today between Meridian Avenue and the alleyway. So there would seem to be no advantage in creating diagonal spaces where you're backing into the through lane of traffic if you don't gain any spaces.
Yeah, I think the designer's thought there was to try to carry the curb extension to support the lane drop. And that was really the reason they created that. If you think it would be equally effective to have that curb extension near the crosswalk, but then just have parallel parking, I don't think that would be too much of an issue. Am I making sense
Well,
there?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, the only time we implemented angled parking was when the street had low volume and you would gain spaces. And sometimes where you have a street with a lot of driveways or an alley or other red curb zones that have to be there, you chop it up so much that you don't really gain. But and then I've shared with you, Ted, I sent Ted an extra communication regarding is there adequate length of the angled parking stalls. My calculations indicate they would extend into the through lanes, but we're going to sort that out offline. With regard to the lane drop for eastbound traffic east of Orange Grove, I think the strategy is right, but the distance shown for the lane drop is not sufficient according to the manual on uniform traffic control devices, which has, a diagram and a figure that shows you how much distance you need given the speed of traffic. And I think they use 3 arrows so that you have lots of room. One example of that is when one travels northbound on Garfield, just going through the Huntington Drive intersection, getting into near the YMCA, that whole block has 3 arrows so that traffic can see there's a lane drop, find a gap, move over, and be well into their lane before you get to the Oak Street intersection. And then my other comment I think I made before, I just want to make doubly sure that we're looking at the total delay for the intersection. If I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, there's about 5 northbound trains and about 5 southbound trains during the PM peak hour, something in that range. I remember the statistic that each time there's a train preemption, it results in 90 seconds of delay over and above that of the traffic signal. So I just want to make sure that's factored in when we show our statistics. Let me see the lower part of this page 10. Does it show Meridian, south leg of Meridian? Was
That's
that on a separate drawing?
On page 12.
Okay, then I have no further questions right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Abelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 hopefully quick questions. Mission at Meridian, looking at the west leg. Am I seeing it right that it's 1 through lane in each direction and then a left turn lane for the eastbound?
Yes.
Okay. So to Commissioner Fisher's point several minutes ago, a few years ago at the prior commission suggestion, right and left turn restrictions were put in at that intersection during peak hours because of the incredible bottlenecking that would happen, which is a measurably improved flow. I'm not sure if you can have a dedicated left turn pocket leading to an intersection where there are turn restrictions during certain hours. I mean, my fellow commissioners can confirm that, but you might just want to consider that. Otherwise, you'll end up with cars stacked in the left turn pocket who can't go anywhere because they can't turn left between, I think it's 4 and 6, Monday through Friday. Yeah.
Those restrictions would have to be removed.
Yeah, which I
That's a good
think would
point.
be a problem.
Thank you.
So just a thought. It's probably the second time I've asked it, so I apologize. I'm right now the lane drop, if we look at Plan 1A, I guess the top of this screen. What property is that? Is that 820 Mission? Is that's west of Prospect, right? Where the lane, that yellow striping starts. Is that a fair, am I getting it right? It's between Orange Grove and Prospect on Mission.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell, the reason the lane drop is not carried all the way to Orange Grove is
just the
here's what I'm thinking, and then I'll be
Yes,
quiet,
sure.
please, for 5 seconds. So southbound Orange Grove at the intersection, right in front of the Arco station, right? Southbound Orange Grove. Right now you have 3 lanes, right? You have a dedicated left, a dedicated right, I believe, and then there's one you can go either way.
yes,
That makes sense.
that's correct.
So my thought is there's no need for all of that. And I'm wondering if it makes sense to eliminate one of these lanes so that there's a dedicated right and one dedicated left. There isn't enough volume to support the need for 2 dedicated lefts or rights. And in fact, the two rights has created issues at that intersection where we asked for cat tracking years ago, which has helped a little bit. So I'm just wondering, in terms of improving safety at the intersection, one dedicated right, one dedicated left, that it might be worth exploring removing that optional middle lane, and then maybe only having, the one lane turning into Mission and maybe starting the lane drop sooner. Because especially there, the volume of traffic is quite low. And if anything, what ends up happening is the people who have sat at the Gold Line crossing for a length of time can be impatient, and that stretch between Orange Grove and Meridian, and particularly Orange Grove and Prospect, because it's so open and underutilized.
Can take a U-turn.
Yeah.
I understand. Okay. Thank you for
So
that.
something to think about. Thank you.
Commissioner Hughes, Vice Chair Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of points. One is that when we do share this with the community, to make sure we have some really outreach, strategic outreach to people, because I am going to go back a ways knowing that we did take a lane off Mission a number of years ago, and there was a huge backlash to that. And it got removed, went back to the 2 lanes. So I just want to make sure that people are aware and that we make them understand that this is, again, we're testing this, but that, this is a different plan than it was a number of years ago, and there's a lot of enhancements. Plus, there's the parklet component and what we've experienced, and also that when this was first envisioned, we were also envisioning the changing dynamic of the pandemic and the changing patterns of the street itself, and people dining, people visiting. Very, a unique situation that has many positives. And then the other question is, one of the things I think we need to be able to clearly be able to share is, to the points that were made, what is the plus on parking, if any, or the minus? But then we're taking and giving X amount of parklets, X amount, so that we can be able to answer those questions.
Sure. So to your first point, I'm glad we broached that subject, because, based on the significance of the change along Mission Street and just our experience in general, but I also will, tag in the residential program implementation. we really do think we should take our time with the outreach and making sure that we do spend some time with the businesses and then the community in general who use Mission Street, which is generally everybody in the city. So at the moment, it looks like we'll be implementing the parklet part of it first before we finalize what's going on with the road diet, and that will follow. And a lot of that is related to the fact that it is a significant change at the center of the city, and we think it warrants that amount of attention. On the second point, they paid very close attention to the parking. We are a slight net decrease. We did remove one of the proposed parklets between Diamond and Fairview on the north side to try to regain a couple spots, and we just didn't really think it was necessary. It would be more expense for the equipment. So we are trying to stay a net 0 with the diagonal parking, but I think in the current plan it's a slight negative. So, but we'll have those counts.
And the last question is, again, as you say, outreach, I would want to also make sure that the chamber and our economic development group is aware, because we have a lot of vacancies right now on Mission. We just lost Videotech. We haven't filled Briganti. There's a number of locations that we need to fill. And we want to make sure that whoever would go into these businesses knows up front that this is a potential, so that they're not surprised.
Yeah, we've been keeping in check with the Chamber of Commerce on this. We even had a session. We haven't shown the mission design yet. We focused on the parklet design to the Economic Development Committee, and through the city manager's office, we're kind of doing this hand in hand because that's our main audience for this project. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hughes. Ted, all right, so I'm gonna keep it real. With 10,000 ADT, I'm probably your biggest fan on one lane in each direction or among them, but I don't know if this is gonna work, like how it's designed today. Like in my opinion, it kind of looks like we put in a bunch of angle parking spots and then the vehicle path just kind of meanders down the street to accommodate the parking. If we start at the left side, the delineators on the median, are those necessary? Is there because we're restricting turns into those driveways, right? So I don't know what the benefit is from really having those there and not striping it as a two-way left turn lane or something that you could turn in and turn into a driveway.
sure. I think the progression of this was that there would be something in the medians. And then
Okay.
after really taking a look at how safe that was, we didn't really want to exceed anything that was taller than 3 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how delineators came into perspective. So
Right.
it's really kind of that. It's just like some sort of visual, some sort of vertical element.
Mm-hmm.
But
we're really not gaining anything, and we're closing access to some of those. I think is there 1 or 2 driveways throughout there? Maybe is that Mission West, Mission Tile?
sure, if we tried to avoid, we identified all the driveways in the plans.
Okay.
So we tried to avoid obstructing driveways with those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, also I agree with Commissioner Fisher. The angle parking on the north side, if there's not a net plus to it, then just keep it parallel. I think, it's difficult to back out with angle parking. It's challenging to see. If cyclists are riding on the street, it's tough to see them if a vehicle's blocking you, especially with some of the larger SUVs that we're seeing on the streets now. So I'm also I would be concerned about that and the railroad track too, because when the gates come down, you really want to clear that track area. And if someone's stopped there to let someone back out of a parking spot, people are going to queue onto the track. And that concern will also carry over to when we get to talking about the eastbound traffic. with one lane going eastbound and then the following intersection. Is that Diamond, the next intersection being, having an RFB? If a pedestrian's there, crossing out, you don't have a ton of storage. If someone's stopping for a pedestrian, I'm concerned that the CPUC and Metro might have concerns around queuing on their tracks. So, and sorry, I'm kind of jumping around, and then also we have one lane eastbound, right? And you have a significant number of pedestrians in that crosswalk. Well, that person in that one travel lane is going to be blocking the through lane, right? When they're yielding to a pedestrian.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so, you bring up a important topic. If these were like, say, like a pedestrian hybrid type of thing, we might have had an opportunity to program them in with the train system, but because they're independent RFPs that are triggered upon, a pedestrian demand, they really, even without any changes here, even when they are installed without a lane reduction, there's probably going to be an issue with the conflict with those two signal systems. And so it really becomes a question of the pedestrian priority over,
I think
the-
it's a train
yeah.
priority.
Well, no, the
right?
train, but I thought you were talking about the west. I thought you were talking about the westbound location.
Yeah. Eastbound. With the
Oh, yeah,
RF
yeah, absolutely.
in their
That's an
view,
issue.
and
Yeah.
then it's
I thought you were
queuing-
talking about on the
it's
other
queuing
side of
as well.
Diamond, and blocking the one lane, but no, you're right. So I mean, the solution to that could be that there isn't a lane drop at that location, which would mean that the whole system moves, east of, Meridian.
Why 2 lanes westbound and 1 lane eastbound? Why not 2 lanes eastbound and 1 lane westbound? I'm just curious about that decision.
I think it's to promote, northbound right turns, eastbound. So it's they're, maybe we need more arrows, but they're if we go to the next page,
Okay, yeah, we can
Yeah.
transition to the next page.
you can see there's an arrow and
Okay.
on the top left corner, there's a right turn arrow installed on the second, westbound lane.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
biggest concern probably for Metro and the CPUC will be queuing downstream that might back up onto the tracks when
Sure.
when those signal systems
So,
are triggered.
that's one of the reasons we wanted that extra capacity to model that with Iteris, is to see how that would change. But yeah, it's a concern.
Okay, and can you also look into, with this angled parking, is ADA, are we required to put in ADA spots and have those been considered? Like accessible parking spots? ADA. Oh, ADA, accessible, Americans with Disability Act.
Right.
You might want to look into it.
Yes. I know you're saying there. Yeah, we can look into that. I feel like we had a discussion on this, but I'll double check what we resolved.
Okay, and I think Commissioner Fisher and Abelson have comments on that first page, and then we'll move to the next one. Commissioner Fisher?
Okay, if we can go back to page 10, I mean,
Jen?
some of this discussion got me looking more closely and thinking, on the westbound Mission at Meridian, is there a left turn lane there, or is that hatched out so that there's no left turn lane?
Westbound, Mission Meridian.
Because you have an eastbound left turn lane, usually they shadow each other out.
No, that, if we're talking about on the very right side, the westbound lane on,
Kind of in yellow right now. Is that the lane you're talking about?
You talking about
Like,
where in
that's
front of
not
where
a-
the four parallel part, the four new
Where the two yellow lines are, is
Mhm.
that a left turn lane or is a painted median?
You mean in front of Jones?
Yes, in front of Jones and Monarca.
that is it's a painted median as it's designed right now.
So if we have an eastbound to northbound left turn lane, why is that not shadowed by a westbound to southbound left turn lane?
Isn't that the issue, though? Same issue about peak hour turn restrictions, and perhaps there shouldn't be turn pockets either way.
Well, the left turn lane gets the left turn vehicle that could cause delay to the through traffic to store there and wait his turn.
Right, but if there's a peak hour turn restriction, or
Well, I mean, we have the peak hour turn restriction because
We
we
s-
don't have a left turn.
so you're saying
So
we'd remove
The,
those?
the preference would be to have a left turn lane so that vehicles could store there and not be in through traffic.
And then there
Sure.
would be no, you wouldn't have restrictions then, as long as you had
Yeah.
turn lanes.
But I mean, I'm just noting that it's a little odd to have a left turn lane in one direction and not shadowed by one in the other.
Sure, I understand. I don't think that was considered. I think the how this resulted in one in the design is that it's basically carrying the lane drop and and providing a northbound right turn lane. So there just wasn't with the lane drop and with keeping the northbound right turn lane, there just wasn't room for it.
What northbound right turn lane?
The in front of Jones, westbound going north on Meridian.
That
Yeah, it's
shows it
not,
as a through lane, right?
well, that, I think we need to add the right turn arrow
Yeah,
on this drawing, because it's on the next page, but you don't see it here.
because you lose the lane on the other side of the intersection.
Yeah, you lose the lane. So there's on the east side of Meridian, it's supposed to be one through lane in each direction and a westbound right turn lane.
So my point in this is that as a general rule, it's always better to have a turn lane where you can rather than not have one, because then left turn vehicles can block the traffic
Sure.
behind it, and then you have reduced capacity. It smooths out.
So I think it's an important point because between your comment, Commissioner Fisher, and Chair Dunlap's comment about the reduction in capacity at the RRFB, and if we want to preserve the north and south parklets, we have, 4 lanes to work with, and we have to consider whether it's important to have to retain 2 eastbound lanes because of the RFB, and whether or not we want to add a westbound right turn only lane. So I
Okay.
think that's really, I think this is the conversation is whether or not there shouldn't be a lane reduction through Meridian.
Okay, but here's the other
And I'll
thing.
just add, and also Commissioner Abelson's comment about like having the dedicated left turn lane eastbound conflicts with the time restriction.
Okay. Here's the thing I'm noting though, that given the stopping points for eastbound traffic and westbound traffic at this odd intersection where the stop lines have to be before the tracks, the paths of the eastbound and westbound left turns, I think, overlap. And one way of overcoming this is with a protected left turn for the eastbound to northbound movement because of the interlock, but also at many crossings, it's desirable to have a protected left turn because when there's a preemption, you can make sure the red arrow stays on so that they aren't entering the intersection over the tracks trying to find a
Mhm.
gap in traffic. So if we have a left turn lane eastbound to northbound, I think we may have to really consider having a protected left turn movement there. Want to make sure no one's ever delayed over the tracks when a preemption starts, either due to PEDs or lack of gaps in the opposing direction.
Thank you.
Mine will be shorter.
Yeah, Commissioner.
So just Commissioner Fisher, so what you're suggesting is a left turn lane westbound Mission to southbound Meridian to mirror the one on the opposite side of the intersection. Just, is that what you're saying? Yeah. So, it just, which makes perfect sense. We just need to keep in mind farmers market days, that'll have to be shut down.
Right,
Broadly,
it would be an
so-
adjustment to their traffic
traffic control plan,
yeah.
that's all, which is not, should be pretty easy to implement. My quick comment or question was, bottom half of this sheet, the westbound direction of Mission, we have currently these diagonal spaces, right? And then there's like an alley as we go westerly. You with me?
Yes,
And then, and that first block from Meridian to the alley, it's a number of storefronts or restaurant and storefronts, which command a lot of business certain parts of the day. And the parking there is quite limited. I'm getting to a point, which is that on the other side of the alley, so west of the alley, right now it's a boatload of red zone. And you'll see there's no parking marked or indicated. My question is, one, I don't understand the need for it. Ultimately, there is a bus stop, I think, but there's a long stretch of westbound Mission west of that alley that's just red zone for no perceivable reason, perceptible reason. And it would be nice maybe to create an opportunity, remove the red zone and put in some parking tees or something, unless there's something I'm missing. Ambulances? Okay.
But they can't go, I thought they could go the alley that they're doing in front.
Do you think they need that whole frontage?
I don't know.
There's a bus stop, but it's further down, right? It's not right where the, oh, it's right after the alley. Okay. Because I've just noticed when I've patronized some of those stores that there's a long stretch of red. It didn't seem to be a reason why. So maybe it's just something they can take a peek at and see if
Sure.
there's an opportunity. That's all.
Because I think it goes red almost all the way to Prospect, right?
Yeah.
Just the whole thing.
So I know it gets complicated and difficult there at times of the day. And if there's an opportunity to create some parking for these shops that's appropriate, maybe we can do that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Abelson. And I think when I closed my eyes and I thought of a mission reconfiguration, I kind of pictured a more traditional reconfiguration that had some sort of turn lane down the middle and one lane in each direction, and maybe space for like a bikeway or a bike facility. With this kind of existing configuration, if your cyclist is traveling along here, you have this angle parking and they're backing out, and there's really there's a lot of pedestrian kind of public space, but then we kind of, there are cyclists on Mission and we kind of lose that space. So I think that's somewhat my feedback on here is like some of this configuration, it seems really we're trying to be like really slick.
well, I think the motivation here was that if there's a major reduction in parking, that it would probably not
the
be
project.
successful.
Mhm.
And with trying to maintain the level of parking, add the parklets in, there's not really any room for dedicated bikeway space. I think that it's a good comment to consider the two-way turn lane for a longer length. I don't think that was something they were trying to avoid. I think it came out of, not being able to use the medians like we wanted to.
Yeah. And we can move on. Let's go to our public comment, Leona.
There's one more quick spot to show you what the
let's
parklets look
start.
like. Yeah, but we can,
You want to go ahead and do that, Leon?
yeah.
Are they on the phone? Oh.
Oh.
Oh,
Whatever you guys want to do, it's up, yeah,
go ahead,
Yeah.
sir.
please.
What
Thank
year was that?
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that historical context. Yeah, and right. Thank you. Ted?
So, if you want to take a look at continue with the design evaluation, we can move on to the next two pages.
Yeah, let's move on.
Sure. So again, the comments on the diamond interactions are heard. I don't know if there's any other comments on this page in particular.
Commissioner Zavala?
I guess there's a couple of things, but I think I'll wait for now. Thank you.
Who wants to go next? Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only question I guess I have is, it's been brought up is, again, do we have a concern with the diagonal parking with the backing up and visuals? Because they're going to be backing into the one lane that's going to be available. Looking at the eastbound here between Fairview and Diamond.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, we're trying to pack a lot into a small area. Again, the diagonal parking isn't a requirement. It's intended to preserve parking where we would lose it otherwise. the idea is that the speeds are slowed. And so therefore, you know, in a space, similar spaces in other cities, they've done this. It's not a concern because there's adequate time to do the backing.
Just concerned about the safety. Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Abelson?
Ted, just a quick question, right where Vice Chair Hughes was. So westbound mission at Diamond, one lane, we cross the intersection. And then it's not clear to me is it one lane and then that right turn pocket start? I'm just not quite sure what's going on the west leg of that T intersection
It's intended to be a right turn lane.
all the
So,
way.
Yeah, so it might, you know, and I think the idea of it starting at Diamond is so that people have adequate time to transition. But maybe it needs a change in markings.
Yeah, you're the experts. It seems awfully long that to have that long a right turn pocket from westbound Mission onto what's going to be northbound Meridian, right? I'm just wondering is there something else that can be used with that space on the west leg other than an extremely long right turn pocket? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. I think
I don't usually see that long a queue to turn right up Meridian.
Sure, I think the options were to continue diagonal parking in that location, but that would just
That's sort
be
of
an
what I was
awkward transition around the diagonal parking to the right turn lane.
thinking. Okay.
So I don't think there was really any other solution there what to do with the space.
Okay. So right now the existing parallel parking
Just remains.
exists.
Yeah.
Preserved. Okay.
And so that area that turns to a right turn lane is really just accessing the parallel parking.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it.
But I'll note it to discuss with the designer.
Thanks, Ted.
Commissioner Fisher?
It's been mentioned before that there's some concern about the crossings at Fairview and Diamond, and that the pedestrian, having pushed the button, will expect to be able to cross immediately. But also at that time, there could be a train preemption 1 block away. So you have a combination of random arrivals for the trains and random arrivals from the PEDs. And it is vital that the vehicles be able to get off the tracks and proceed, out of the intersection. Something that I think should be explored is if there could be a delay in the call being placed for the flashing lights for the RRFBs when there is a preemption. That way, vehicles might be able to exit the tracks since there's only 1 lane.
We did discuss that because of the technology that was selected for the RFBs. That's not an option. If it were something different where it was a different type of device that could be tied into the preemption, that'd be possible, but because they're independently operated and pedestrian triggered RFBs, there's no way to do that.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
it's something then we'd have to monitor very closely
Mhm.
because there's a concern. I had the comment before that with the dimensions shown, it looks like diagonal parking vehicles would be intruding into the lane, but I guess you and I will work that out over the next few days. What else? With regard to Mission at Fremont, you have a wide width of left turn channelization. You have your left turn pocket, and then you have your white striped gore area next to it. And that's opposed by the lack of that's opposed by the other alternative where you have your left turn lane to the right of the median area. It seemed like it would seem that with this operation, the left turn channelization on the west leg of the intersection should mirror that on the east leg. And if you were to do that, you would be able to see opposing vehicle very readily because the opposing through vehicles would not be blocked by cars stored in the left turn lane. So if you look at the left turn channelization on the west leg, where you have left turn traffic to the left and the gore area to the right, if you mirrored that on the other side of the intersection, you'd have great visibility for left turns. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I think there's a gore area there. I don't think it's as wide. It's 1 foot different. But so that's what you're saying. I think that on the gore at we're talking about Fairview.
No, I'm talking about Fremont.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. With the 9 foot gore area versus
A 9 foot median.
so if that were the case, I think it's only a median for a few feet. It's a 2-way turn after that. So I think you'd have to eliminate the and the reason it's a 2-way turn, I think, is because of the gas station there. So I think you'd have to eliminate the 2-way turn in order to create a gore area.
Yeah. I think we got a lot of meandering in the striping. First, traffic is traveling near the north curb, then they go to the south curb. The left turn channelization is, a regular 10 or 11 feet, then suddenly it bulbs out at Fremont. Then I think, I've offered an alternative offline, but I think it's a bunch of meandering. So with that,
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. And yeah, I kind of stated my preference for it to be a little simpler and stated the concern around queuing on the tracks, especially, we're putting delineators there. So if someone's on the track and they're trying to clear, they're gonna need to run over a delineator to get out of the way. And that's the delineators kind of in front of T-Morrow and La Monarca, right there. If you're heading east, you have delineators on that median, and if someone's trying to get off the track, they're gonna drive over those.
Unless there's another solution that we're missing, the only possibility might be that there can't be a lane drop in that location.
Okay. And then also Commissioner Fisher kind of mentioned it in front of what's the Indian restaurant's name? Radhika. It's the same thing in front of Republic of Lucha, where it looks like we have 3 parallel parking spots and you're replacing it with 3 diagonal parking spots.
So you're talking about east of Diamond?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that
Diamond on the north side.
that was actually a parklet until we opted to not add
Okay.
another one. So it could probably just be returned to parallel parking.
Probably should.
Yeah.
And then once you get to Fremont, I kind of stated earlier, you have a lot of people using that south approach crosswalk on Fremont. And if you have one through lane, the people heading east and turning south on Fremont will be stopped, blocking that through lane heading eastbound in front of the pumpkin Christmas tree lot. So if we could think about that, and it looks like we have some extra space there to play around with that configuration. And finally, you mentioned, this design was really a lot of this design was to preserve or increase parking supply. If we were to choose the safest, the best design for bicycles, pedestrians, motorists that accommodated kind of everyone, what impacts would it, what parking impact would that be? Would it be 5 spots or 30 spots?
We can provide you that. It would be fairly significant
Okay.
because you can see so just by looking at 1, 2, 3, say for 3 parallel spots, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 diagonal spots, and we're removing a couple for the parklet expansion. So it wouldn't necessarily be aggregately a lot in the aggregate. It would be localized, and that would be the issue. Is that would basically remove parking in front of storefronts versus the balanced solution is where we expand like add a parklet. We've sort of any parking that is removed is kind of added back in adjacent with the diagonal parking. So yeah, I don't think we could do a count on that and see what the impact is.
Okay. Commissioner Zavala?
Yeah, I have a couple different things. The first one is actually just a quick question about sort of lights and how they're functioning during this project. Has there been any like consideration for maybe kind of like what Pasadena does, where you let the pedestrians have the walk signal prior to the start of the green light for through traffic? Is that something that has been considered yet?
Sure. So we're talking about a leading pedestrian interval.
Yes.
In this project, we probably wouldn't make those types of changes to the signal timing. But yes, ultimately, that's when we do have projects that make changes to traffic signals. We're looking to offer leading pedestrian intervals and even adding pedestrian detection systems as well. So that won't be a part of this project, but it is something to consider generally.
Yeah.
When we do improvements.
I guess the reason why I brought that up was because maybe that could be a solution that would kind of meet or sort of kind of meet halfway with sort of like some of the issues that we've had with these kind of bringing it up right there over by the train tracks with the turn lanes and whatnot. Maybe like that could be something that could be explored instead of changing some of those turn lanes in a certain way, because at least you're giving some sort of safety feature for pedestrians during the duration of the project. Like I'm not, I know this is a lot, this is a lot that you guys do. And these are very, like complicated, complex issues that you guys are solving. And like, honestly, 100%, thank you for that. I think that this project, one of the things I was also going to say is, with what Chair Dunlap said about a bikeway, that was like the only thing that I was sort of thinking about was, has there been any consideration for like protected, like this is like, I know that this is definitely may not work with the current project as it stands, especially with the parklets and everything like that. But have you considered like a protected bike lane by using like a space in between the sidewalk and like parallel parking, like kind of pushing the parallel parking out instead of using like diagonal parking? Like, was that could that ever be something that would be explored?
Sure. We have seen that design in some instances. It usually requires a much further reconfiguration of that shoulder sidewalk area. I don't know if it's something that's feasible in this project, but we could ask our designer if that's something that we could do. We've seen it before.
Just out of curiosity, I know it's also really difficult because of the curb right there, the curb extensions would also kind of create an issue where like, the bikers would have to sort of figure out a way in, and then alongside that with the bulb outs. I'm sorry, the parklets, but yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I have two.
Go ahead.
This same sheet, top half, the Republic of Lucia area that Chair Dunlap was discussing a few minutes ago, where it's currently, I think, 3 diagonal spaces, and the discussion was maybe just preserving the existing parallel parking. You with me? Yeah.
Yes,
So if we did that, and I have no objection to it, what would happen to the travel lanes there?
we'd probably, the designer would likely widen the median to
So it'd
keep
still be with the one
keep
travel
them
lane.
narrow. Yeah.
Okay. Because if you widen the median and preserve just one travel lane, it looks like it would continue onto the right turn lane. So just something to
Right.
keep in mind, yet another challenge. I just wanted to point
Yes.
that out.
At some point I should just ask, like, maybe it's just a kind of general nod of the head. Is the general feedback that we'd like to see a more traditional approach to a lane drop where, at the risk of possibly losing parking, that we're going back to a parallel parking model, creating maybe more space for cyclists and generally like 2 through lanes and a 2-way turn lane? Is that generally what I'm hearing, or is that too much of a general comment to get consensus on?
That would be what I think, what I would support. I think every time I've gone anywhere in South Pasadena in my car, I've generally found a place to park. I don't park in front of those businesses because there's just cars there. I don't know the turnover there, but usually I can find a place to park. And I know we have parking structures around there, so
Yes.
it's my just experience without any data in the city that, if this project were to remove a handful or so of parking spots, that the surrounding streets or the existing structures could accommodate that demand. And I'd hate for us to make decisions around parking just to get every single parking spot. Because I think we saw that, on the Fair Oaks project when they did the bulb outs, where they designed them in the way to maintain every little parking spot. And that's how we kind of got the unique design, unique but sometimes beautiful design of those, was, trying to maintain parking.
Mhm.
We see that in front of the Vons, and no one ever parks there. I've never seen anyone park out there in front of that Vons, but we have all those parking spots out there on that street. So that's mine. Yeah, Source Code. Well, yeah. So I don't know if that's everyone else's feelings, but
Well, I'll say something stronger. I'm very uncomfortable with the premise that we can't provide an adequate lane drop. We must shorten it so that there's conflict because we got to get X number of parking spaces. That should not drive it. You design a proper lane drop if you need it, and then the parking is whatever you get after that. So I'm very uncomfortable with that. Also, and I'm not the one to really speak to this because I no longer ride a bike, but I don't think diagonal spaces are friendly to bikes. You're challenged to see them when you're backing up. You can barely see the car. The car proceeding in the lane can barely see the guy coming back. I've got an idea of how we could make this a whole lot simpler, but I don't think the desire to have X number of parking spaces should govern all the facets of the design.
So 2 quick comments, and I want to make the specific comment that I was going to make before, and I think Chair Dunlap spoke somewhat to it. My concern about having one through lane, eastbound Mission at Fremont, and I think that's what the current design shows. Is that correct? One through lane, the Gore, and then the dedicated left.
Yes.
So to points raised earlier, that really concerns me because basically those turning right jam up the traffic in that lane between the PEDs crossing and the right turns. So if you really want to go through that intersection, you really have to be in the number, I guess, the number one lane. Now we're saying, well, there's just going to be one lane. So if there are people turning right, then we've got to wait for whatever the ped conflict is to be resolved before they turn right if they're at the head of the line. And then you get some cars moving through and then the light changes. Right, already, I think the signal's relatively short for Mission traffic versus Fremont traffic, if I remember correctly. So right now that intersection isn't great. And if we just have the one through lane, it could be a problem. But this is what I wanted to mention earlier, to the points just made about the overall concept. That was sort of what I envisioned going into this. If we can make this work, I'm okay with it. I think a simpler approach might be an easier approach. And if the genesis for this is to preserve parking, I'm not sure how much we lose with the sort of simpler two-way turn lane concept. I also don't want to wait another 6, 8, 10 months for something to happen. So I'm fine with a change in overall approach, but I think we need to just, I don't know how much that impacts our ability to move forward. I would say though, that if there's going to be a significant reduction in parking, that the businesses need to be aware of that and somewhat on board, because there could be a strong concern about it. I'm not saying that should be the driver. I'm just saying, given how reactions can happen around here, it might be something to think about. That's all. Thanks.
Vice Chair Hughes?
Just very quickly, I concur that, having it simplistic so people understand it and make it easy so that they have an easy comprehension of how we're doing this. But again, I would also agree that, we want to be aware of what we're losing in parking and make it aware, make the community aware, the businesses aware, so that they're not surprised by that. But but with that, I think we also need to talk about the enhancements and the things that we're doing and we're bringing to the street, that the parklets, the planters, all those elements, which I know we haven't even gotten to yet, because those are great selling points to enhance the street and bring more traffic, bring more business and more opportunity.
I agree. Let's get to that part.
Yeah, sorry. If we were to go to the simpler approach, does that impact the number of parklets or anything like that, or that part of it would stay the same?
Well, I mean, basically the
We don't know
parklets
yet.
that exist stay. I mean, even with the
I mean,
configuration
as
now.
planned and designed.
Well, we may tweak the new ones, the new blue ones that are not associated with a particular business. They're there for some sort of public use, art, or whatever we decide to use with them.
Okay.
But there's no intent to change the existing parklet locations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. We can shoot to the last page. Hopefully it's simple because there's not much on there. But let's go to page 12. Okay, so this is the termination of the setup on Mission Street. And then at the bottom there, we have the little section of Meridian where there has been parking added instead of the wide northbound lane on Meridian.
Any comments on that?
Comments?
Really quick.
Well, can you explain the parking on Meridian Avenue? Looks like your diagonals are backwards unless you wanted back in parking.
Yeah, I think that was an error. I think it's probably the orientation of the drawing that caused that, but yeah, thank you for adding that.
Are there spaces there now? There are spaces there.
Yeah.
Parallel space.
So it's just,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's just increasing the parking.
Got it.
basically.
But the one thing I'd like to point out is if you are westbound on Mission and you're east of the intersection, there's only one through lane. And as you proceed westbound to the other side of the intersection, there's suddenly 2 lanes. So you could stripe one westbound lane west of Fair Oaks and not have to drop a lane because there's only one lane feeding it. So there's one westbound lane feeding Mission or feeding the far side of the intersection. So you don't have to create two lanes only to have to drop it. You just keep it one lane. So that'd be a way of reducing.
So let me clarify, you're talking about the west leg of Fair Oaks and Mission,
Yes.
and how that you only have one westbound through lane coming from Mission?
Yes, so you don't have to
Sure.
develop two only to have to drop it.
So I think that makes sense. I think that based on the Iteris basically the Iteris studies that don't touch Fair Oaks and Mission, and that's why I think that the designer followed. So I don't think it was necessarily the intent of where to do the lane drop. I think there was a concern about the level of service, and I'm assuming that there's a degree of southbound right turns that come on the Mission. Maybe was the reasoning behind it, but I understand what you're saying.
One additional thought, it's something that we've talked about a couple of times since Commissioner Fisher brought up the intersection. Fair Oaks and Mission, East Leg, westbound one lane, as Commissioner Fisher just mentioned. That lane is quite wide. It's right in front of a Comerica Bank, I think is what's right there at that intersection. Okay. What happens routinely is because there is backup for the through move and the lane is wide enough, people squeeze and sort of create a right turn lane there. And what I'm wondering is, since we're looking at this intersection and making looks like some striping adjustment or change on the west leg, if it's possible to create a right turn pocket for westbound Mission onto northbound Fair Oaks. Am I making sense? See where I'm at?
Westbound Mission.
So westbound Mission turning right onto northbound Fair Oaks. So westbound Mission, that through lane is quite wide.
Oh,
Okay.
I see.
It's
On the-
inordinately
on the
wide.
east leg.
Right. And so what happens is a lot of people that want to turn right there squeeze in between the lineup to go through,
Want to turn right.
and they want to turn
northbound.
right to go northbound.
Got it. Okay.
So it seems like there's enough space there to create a dedicated right turn pocket so that people can safely and orderly navigate that intersection. Because instead what happens is, because it's wide, the through lane, you've got the cars squeezing between the curb and the through traffic to make the right turn. And if the through traffic is too far to the right, those people can't turn right, and then there's more backup. So I'm just wondering if we're there, if we can stripe a right turn pocket. But we've talked about it before, but it didn't go anywhere. So I'm just raising the question since we're looking at the street.
Are you saying that for the Slow Streets project overall, like to have that with the Slow Street?
No, it's really,
Okay.
it's just for the traffic to create a more orderly flow of traffic
Permanent.
at that permanently.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the residents on Mission in that neighborhood, east of Mission, would appreciate it. I mean, yes, east of Fair Oaks would appreciate it. You see what I'm getting at?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the alignment between the east and the west legs, but I see what you're saying.
Right. And then what ends up happening is that sort of forces the through traffic to line up really nicely with the number one lane across the intersection, traveling west on Mission. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah, I see that.
Just a thought. Thanks.
Thank you. Ted, let's move on
Okay.
to the parklets. I think
sure.
this commission has seen a parklet presentation before, right?
Yeah,
So
so
everyone's generally familiar with what a parklet
everything
is.
else you see tonight does not require any action or recommendation. It's just to, give you a status update.
Okay.
So quickly, this is what we'll be showing the Cultural Heritage Commission on Thursday. This is what the current parklet design looks like. So basically, we would be procuring new K-rails. So you do see K-rails here. They are designed in such a way to fit the space. So they have different transitions. Like on the left, you see a taper, and on the right, you see an actual like a corner piece, like a 40 or 135-degree corner piece, painted. And the idea there is to match. In this case, they were trying to match the color scheme of the building, but we would want to have some sort of consistency across all of the parklets. And then in this case, also there's a new fabricated, custom made, basically, top to the K-rail that can house planters. So if you jump to the next slide, you can kind of see it on the angle there, and that's where we would utilize some of the planters would be outside of the K-rails on the following edge of the traffic. So the K-rail, the planters don't have any functional use. They're completely decorative. And if you go to the next slide, you can see on the leading edge, there's planters that can be inside the K-rails. But because this leading edge basically creates like a triangular gap inside the parklet with the flooring, because all the flooring that we've purchased is rectangular. The design consultant, so this is one of the sub-consultants of Alta, it's the Arroyo Group, was proposing that we install some sort of planters inside that area to take up the space and that people won't like step off into that area, basically. Go to the next slide. I think you might be able to see. Yeah, so this is kind of a zoom in of one of the potential tops to the K-rails. So in the last picture, we had planter boxes, but this one is just a fabricated wood facade on top. And you'd see there's railings inside the K-rail along the parklet. So that keeps people from stepping into that small gap between the parklet flooring and the K-rail. So generally, the parklet flooring is, continuous, has a railing around it, and that's inside that is the business owner's space. We would provide guidelines as to what they can do with it and the type of furniture and the style of the furniture they can use. But outside of that, the K-rails, the K-rail facade, the parklet flooring, the railings, and the planters would be the city's installation and responsibility. There might be one more. Nope, that's it. So
The K-rails permanently, are we investing those or are they rented?
the ones we have are rented. It would probably make economical sense to purchase these next round, to purchase them. So next step, with regard to the residential section, continuing the survey responses, reviewing them again at 3 months. This Thursday, discussing the parklet design with cultural heritage, working with the businesses on the parklet implementation, because as I said, that'll come first. We won't deploy the road diet and the parklet at the same time. We'll do the parklets now is what we're working on. And based on your comments tonight, we'll refine the Mission Street configuration and propose the different modeling scenarios that we'll want to run. We may want to reconfigure it based on our discussion tonight, and then we'll be back here for the next step. Any other questions on slow streets?
Commissioner Avison.
One question. My understanding is the Mission Street reconfiguration, however it ends up, that's also a pilot test demonstration type project. Is there once that takes place, is there a certain length of time that you're anticipating? Would it be like a 6-month thing, or what are you expecting? We don't know yet.
We don't know yet. I think it would be at least 6 months. It really depends. The Mission Street configuration is going to be much more significant investment based on the final configuration than the slow streets, because we'll actually be removing a lot of markings and painting them. We won't be able to do it with tape. And so, we'll want to get the cost benefit just right about how long we're going to do it for.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, could we go back to one of the
Sure.
sketches of the that's good. Just one suggestion, let's not have the large pot at the crosswalk, you won't be able to see a child should a child run out.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just preface by saying that our consultant that did this rendering was not looking at the street space in any way. They were focusing on the building and the parklet, so it might not even be accurate where that's located.
Okay. But also I want to ask a question. You gave us a schedule like Commissioner Abelson. I don't want to go round and round and round too many times. I'd like to suggest something that I think is feasible, and then, then the consultant has some direction if you would agree it is feasible. And that would be, let's simplify the operation. No development of lanes and then dropping of lanes and, suddenly you're in a trap left turn lane or you're in a right turn lane. I suggest that from Fair Oaks to a point east of Orange Grove, that the physical center 10 feet be used for left turn channelization. Whether it's a conventional pocket or a two-way left turn lane or something you want to reserve for a median, whatever. The center 10 feet would be left turn channelization. That would be continuous throughout the project. That next to that 10-foot strip on either side would be 10-foot through lanes, one eastbound, one westbound. And then next to that would be a 4-foot bike buffer. One east, one west. And then adjacent to the bike buffer, 4 feet wide, would be a 5-foot bike lane. And then after that, parallel parking where you don't have a parklet. And there will be some reduction in parking from creating the parklets, but I think it needs to be parallel to be bike friendly. And so we have a reduced number of parking spaces. It is what it is. And I think that would be a project that would be bike friendly. There's a lot of pedestrian amenities. We've enhanced the beauty of the street here. And I think that would be a desirable way to go from my personal opinion. One more item though. We have got to mitigate the intersection of Meridian and Mission, because when the train preemption comes and we only have one lane departing from the crossing, we want to make sure that there's enough capacity for them to get through. So if we change the signal timing, put in additional detection, we will be able to provide that extra green time for them that makes up for the loss of a lane. I would recommend that as a direction to make the project a little bit smoother. In my experience with road diets and such, generally the rule of thumb is 10,000 or under ADT. Apparently we're right at that point. If you put in a continuous left turn lane, you get the left turns out of the through traffic. If you have a little bit of space for right turns to go around the one through lane, then that gets the right turns out of the way. If you look at what I proposed, a 4-foot bike buffer and a 5-foot bike lane, that provides an additional 9 feet for them to get around the through vehicle. So I would recommend that that be seriously looked at.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Zavala,
Not this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Hughes.
Just trying to look up. 'Cause I think when we was saying in 2007, I don't think we had the level of Gold Line traffic. So even when we did our test back then, I don't believe we had the level of metro trains going through. So that, again, to Commissioner Fisher's point, is going to be a consideration more so now than it was back then.
Because the line has been extended several times, and
And
with
there's
that,
more trains.
right.
Versus when that was done back in 2007.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments.
And I think, I'm sorry, Ted. I'm sorry, you know, all this work in the existing configuration. And I know if we've talked, you've probably shopped it around a lot. I think I also prefer the simpler configuration with the 2A left turn lane. I think it has the best chance of working. You know, like Commissioner Fisher said, with the 2 lane left turn lane, the left turner gets out of the way, and then you have that room for the person potentially to go around or get out of the way of the through traffic, turning right. Um, yeah, and I just say that not to complicate things, but I'm just saying that because I think it has the best chance of working, and I want to see it succeed. All right, and thanks for showing the parklets. I think that those look really nice. Personally, I feel like that brings more value to our city than 3 or 4 cars just kind of sitting out there all day. That's my my opinion. And did I hear you correctly that the parklets are going to go in like before the reconfiguration?
Yes, that before, we don't have the timeline yet because we have, we have a couple of pathways to accomplish here. We have to, number one, get some buy-in on the design aspect of it. We need to procure elements of it, which require
Yeah.
city council. So there's a couple things to do.
So any sort of parking impact would happen with the parklet installation.
Not necessarily because to start, we would only implement parklets where they already exist, with the exception of maybe that small space between Arrow and La Monarca, where I think there's like 2 or 3 spots right there. But largely wherever there's a parklet, we're just replacing it with a parklet, so it shouldn't really
Okay.
be an impact.
But then the new parklets would be installed with the reconfiguration
Yes,
effect.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, if there was additional 2 parklets for public space use, those would come in with the road diet.
Okay. Because I was thinking if you went ahead and put in all the parklets, then you kind of know what impacts there are to parking and how many, do we need to, is there really, do we need to accommodate that parking in the reconfiguration?
Sure. Yeah, I mean the parklet.
But I understand.
Yeah,
I
you got
work
it, yeah.
for a local agency. I understand
Yeah.
the challenge around parking, but
I should add that one thing is like, especially in front of like Arrow, because of the purchase parklets, they're a fixed dimension, whereas the existing parklets are just whatever was built. So it does change the pattern a little bit because we've got a fixed distance from the curb that we have to accomplish or accommodate with the new parklets.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed. All right.
Chair, just one quick question.
Yeah, real
I know
quick.
real
It's
quick.
9:30.
On the planters, is that something we have or that's part of the purchase that we have in storage? Or is that what potential? And then if we do have them, if we put them in, would the city then be responsible for the fauna and the maintenance?
So the first part is we've already purchased them, so we already have them in storage. Second part is we're working with, this is what we would work out with the businesses as far as apportioning our responsibilities to be part of our sidewalk dining permit program. We have a pretty good idea of how we would want to divide that up. It would likely be that the city's responsible for that, but we have to still see, it might make more sense for the business to be responsible for watering them, almost like they're responsible for parkway trees. So it's not exactly figured out yet. We do have the opportunity to install systems that kind of slow water those planters so they can last a while. They don't need to necessarily be watered every day.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ted.
Of course. So it's an action item. Do we want a general recommendation about our all the comments tonight? Do we want a little more specific about the direction that we've just recently talked about simplifying the corridor? It's up to the commission.
So I'll say I'm supportive of Commissioner Fisher's and Chair Dunlap's suggested approach. So I'm good with that. And I would say that with the specific comments that we made, to the extent that they're consistent with that approach, I would be okay with that.
Sounds like a motion to me. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any opposed? All right, thanks, Ted, and thanks for
Sure.
everyone who's still with us.
So
tonight.
let's, so we have two more items.
Oh my
We'll get this, we'll make this
goodness.
fast. We have our meeting approval, minutes approval. I
Yeah.
do want to make one comment. This is a routine item. We do have direction to change how we're handling, minutes. And so all commissions are standardizing on a different action-based format. It was an email that the city manager's office sent out, so please take a look at it. So the number one, the breadth of the minutes will be reduced to simply like one line items and action items. Number one, not on this ones we're approving tonight, but starting next month. And then number two, we've been given direction that the discussion of alteration to the minutes should occur during the commission meeting. So that would probably prevent us from circulating the minutes ahead of time. So this is a new thing that we just are finding out about, but I want to just prepare the commission for that.
Would it be appropriate for you to still circulate the minutes between two commission members?
We might be able to do that. Let me find out. Okay.
I missed something and it may be because of the hour. So I understand the simplified format. Makes perfect sense. I don't understand why they wouldn't be distributed ahead of time.
I think the idea is that if there's going to be a discussion about the change to the minutes, the discussion would have to happen in a public atmosphere versus,
Oh, so they would
That-
still be part of the agenda packet.
right.
That we, okay,
It would be,
All right.
yeah, it would just,
It wouldn't be that-
it takes it from offline to online.
Got it.
Basically, yeah,
no problem.
But likely two commission members could work together.
possibly. Yeah, let's find out about that.
Okay.
Okay.
But I would think in time, there wouldn't be the need for two commissioners to work together because all we're gonna say is Commissioner Abelson commented on this, Commissioner Fisher commented on that without getting into their head as to what they really meant.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
likely. Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, with that, let's go to approval of the August 15th minutes. Does anyone have any comments on those?
Liana, did you want to add to anything I just said? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Hughes?
Just a few typos that I think I probably missed. On the first page, in-person comments, Michael Tan expressed concern about the safety of pedestrians, probably need an S there. And then the second one, Gina Thomas, after Hermosa Street, period. And on this next page, first paragraph, last line, analyze means a period. Further down under public comment where it says Commissioner Abelson has asked about the scope of work. What is the next steps process regarding public meetings? Needs a question mark. And then at the very bottom, I think we need space between the two sentences. There was question, ended up with operational, and then there's no space to start another. The commission also asked. So that's just formatting. Those were all the changes I had.
Anyone else? Commissioner Abelson?
Thank you, Chair Dunlap. So under information reports, item 2, second section, I guess, where it says public comment. The way that header appears, it makes it look like everything below it is public comment, but it's only the Tucker Nelson item that's public comment. The rest of it is so maybe just connect Tucker Nelson to public comment as one paragraph. So it's sort of clear that that's the only public comment. That's just a form issue. Moving down the page, section 3, project status update, third paragraph. Starting Commissioner Fisher, that should read, Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Abelson both inquired about the update regarding timing at Mission and Garfield and how was it changed. That's fine. The next sentence should read, the concern was insufficient green time for Garfield. So it's just reworking that second sentence to read as I just stated, please. Next paragraph should read, where it says the commission also asked, instead that should read, Commissioner Abelson asked about the effort regarding a second crossing guard at Huntington and if any other options recommended by the consultant were being pursued. Okay, the rest of that paragraph is fine. Next paragraph. At the end, it says, it starts, there was a question about the high school loading zone timing and when would communications be complete? And it should say loading zone operational. It says option, loading zone operational. Next page under communications, paragraph 5. Let's see, the first line is fine. Council Liaison Donovan responded no to questions raised from Vice Chair Hughes and Commissioner Abelson regarding community notifications. Okay, and here's where the change picks up. Of listening sessions held by the city with certain residents of Grand Avenue regarding, and then pick up with slow streets. Next, section 6, first paragraph, Commissioner Fisher commented. Second line, it says about the upcoming improvements. Should say upcoming slow streets improvements, just because that's what he was talking about. Next paragraph, Commissioner Abelson, second line. Towards the end, it says no parking signs are installed. Just remove are installed. Towards the end of that paragraph, let's see, third line from the bottom where it says some short-term solutions. And then it says where the 2 lanes become 1 and then insert on Orange Grove Avenue and then pick up with at the curve at Oliver. Next sentence, it's fine. He reminded staff about approaching the city of Pasadena about reducing the lanes on Orange Grove. So adding those words from 2 to 1 north of Columbia. And then the rest of it's fine. Last, Vice Chair Hughes acknowledged the tragedy and then add off of Orange Grove that took place over the weekend. And then last sentence of that paragraph, Vice Chair Hughes thanked staff for addressing a large pothole on Orange Grove Avenue. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Fisher?
No.
Commissioner Zavala? Do I have a move?
I would so move the
Motion.
amended minutes.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No one opposed. Minutes approved. Our next item is project status update. In the interest of time, staff's time, maybe you can just hit the
I'm gonna
very
hit
high
two-
points.
Two projects.
And then
yes.
commissioners, I'll trust that we can all read the project status update, but if there's any item that's pressing, we can certainly take questions on that.
Only the highest of the high.
The highest.
Absolutely. I just want to really cover 2 things. Number one, the project status report you'll notice has been updated. There was a request to try to include budget information as we have it. And so we've added that to the left column. I do want to make you aware of the first thing, our ADA sidewalk improvements project. So we're in a situation where we are still moving forward with the sidewalk project. But we have additional unallocated funding available to us to the project. So that's a good thing because number one, because of the inflation and the cost of construction and everything like that, and some of these meridian locations where we're currently focusing have a little bit of a more complicated configuration. We would have needed more money anyway to do this work. So to make use of that unallocated funding, we're going to cancel the current CDBG project, which is part of the procedure, and then initiate what we would call an off-cycle project, which there wouldn't be any change to the scope. We would still do these locations, but it allows us to extend and make use of the full financing. So if we had about 200,000, we think we might have closer to like 500,000 available, but we have to expend it in the same amount of timeline. So we're going to go through this process with council. It requires a 30-day public hearing, which is a federal requirement. We're going to include the intersections for the AD improvements that we already had in our current list. Can you jump to the next slide, Liana? We're proposing if we have additional money on top of that, we're proposing a couple other locations that we may be able to add in. We don't know if we'll be able to. What we did was we focused on a high density I'm losing my words here. High density residential section of the city that currently has no ramps. So we're not even talking about ADA compliant ramps. We're talking about doesn't have any ramps. And so what we looked at was the Raymond Hill area, Amberwood and Raymondale. There's a lot of multifamily, high density residential areas there. And there's a lot of pedestrian usage and a lot of street parking, but there are no ramps at all. Whereas some other locations in the city, you'll see ramps even though if they're not ADA compliant. So if we do have additional funding after we've done our evaluation, we're proposing, and this isn't completed yet, that we would seek to apply the funding there. And then we do have there's one corner near the library at Oxley and Fairview. You can see the picture there where there's no ADA ramps there, but this one isn't really an accessible ramp. It's based the way it's configured. We would want to improve that. There's kind of like a little dip, but largely you can't really navigate that with, a disabled person would have difficulty navigating that. Whereas the other components, the other sides of that intersection have ramps. They're not ADA compliant, but they're wide berth ramps that allow somebody to walk up them easily. So that was one location that we were planning on targeting
And that gets traffic a lot because of the library.
because of the library.
So,
Yeah.
quick question.
Yes.
So, and I think it's great.
Sure.
It looks like there is a ramp there, but you're saying it's not a ramp or it's not a sufficient ramp?
It's technically a slope down ramp, but if we were to turn the lens around, you'd see the other ones have a wider berth and a wider opening, whereas this one is just that tiny little section that has a ramp, and this
So
it's
a
hard to see in the
wheelchair
picture,
wouldn't really fit
but
well.
and then there's a lift on the sidewalk just beyond it. So the idea would be to correct that
Gotcha.
location.
And you're okay with the other corners? Those are okay?
I mean, ideally they could be ADA, but right now they are not they're not distressed as much as this one is.
Okay, I was just gonna say,
Sure.
you know this much better than I ever will,
Sure.
but I'm just wondering if we have these extra funds and we're doing work at that corner, if it's possible, if you think it's appropriate and necessary to do the others, maybe.
If we could, yeah, but that would probably really be pushing it with the
Okay.
funding. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to navigate right now. The cost estimates have increased significantly since we started the project over the last few years. And so we want to be transparent in that if we do have extra funds and we need to move quickly, we'll probably prioritize these locations to tag them into the project.
Great.
Question. In the Raymondale area, there are steep streets because it's in a hillside area. So if you were to build the access ramps, would you satisfy the slope requirements for the handicap?
Yeah, our understanding is that the slope requirements are adjusted when you have that grade scenario. So we may have to it may not be feasible once we look at it, but in talking to our street designer, we have had that situation in other areas, and I think there's a way to accommodate it when you have a situation like that. So it's a good question. We don't know the answer.
Is there an exception saying that you can't overcome the street geometry, so it's okay? But
Yeah,
not
it's
perfect
it's
in an
kind of
imperfect
in that
world?
area. Exactly. Yeah. I think you try to work against the grade to try to use the reverse slope to your advantage when you're trying to go the other direction. That makes sense. So like if you're going uphill, you use that to sort of make your slope down, versus if you're coming downhill, there's no way you can flatten out that slope, if that makes sense. Yeah. So we'll have to see. But didn't want to leave the commission out of the loop in what we're trying to do.
Thanks, Ed.
So next couple of slides you've seen before. These are all repeat from our State of Streets meeting. The reason I want to bring this up, I'm going to just shoot through these. You guys are familiar with them. is because we wanted to give you the initial view, no discussion needed, but the initial view of the areas that we divided up for our future street program. We had talked about dividing up the city into sections, not for the current project sets, but for future project sets. So this is the 2020 pavement condition index. You've seen this before. You can jump to the next one, Liana. And during our state of streets, we talked about funding levels, how much you're going to put in each year. You jump to the next one, Liana. Sorry, I'm going to jump quickly. We talked about, again, you've seen this slide about all the elements that go into planning out your street construction, considering utility improvements, arterial versus residential, what funding do you have? Development projects, things like that. You jump to the next one. This was Burbank's plan, if you recall this from our session a few months ago. Let's go to the next slide. We still have sewer repairs. Next slide is water repairs and fire repairs. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here we are. So this is two things. There was a request from the commission. Let's actually jump one more slide. Let's just jump past this. It's almost the same, but it adds in some more lines. So there was a request from this commission to sort of map out what streets were already on the list, I'll say the list in quotes. And so you see that here. You see projects that were completed in orange, our next round in red, our round after that in blue, and then potentially where we could slurry in green and purple from the previous slurry list. Now I'll say the blue and red are bid package construction packages that are moving forward because the streets need to be repaired. The green and purple, which were on our previous slurry or Cape Seal treatment lists, may have changed condition since then and may have to be reconsidered. Not just that, we may want to consider restructuring how we do those surface treatments into an area formation. This
You
is the
say
area
blue and red,
formation.
you mean the street segments highlighted in blue and red?
Yeah,
not the
exactly.
blue-
Sorry,
Not the blue
yes.
zone and red
Yes.
zone.
So the words red, green, blue, purple, orange,
Okay.
pink, yellow are the proposed 7 zones of the city, which equally more or less equally distribute the pavement surface in the city, removing arterial streets. So the idea here, and again, we're going to bring this back to discuss. We just wanted to pass you the map so you can take it home and think about it. The idea is that in an eventual program, we would move from area to area each year and do a set of projects as a matter of capturing all things that need to be done, utilities and so forth. And there's a matter of cost efficiency and predictability in doing it this way. So again, arterial streets would be separate. You see the yellow dividing lines of the area. Some of them are on arterial streets. But for example, green and purple, Fair Oaks runs through those. Fair Oaks wouldn't be, a slurry project. It would be a separate project. But the residential streets, to the extent the city could afford it, would be done in that area. And that's the next iteration of this, is doing the evaluation of what's the cost of doing it this way, by compiling the various different types of infrastructure projects that need to be done. And, how long would it take to bring our pavement condition index up to a reasonable level?
What
Yes.
fiscal year would this potentially begin?
We don't even know yet. Yeah. Yeah. Because basically we've got about $4 million this year to spend. Given our current budget scenario, which could change based on our fund balance evaluations, all ongoing. But most of that will be taken up with the red and the blue bid package projects on here. Whatever will remain, we can program for slurry. And then whatever the city can apportion for street projects in the coming fiscal years based on the overall 5-year, 5 to 10 year projections of capital spending and operational needs in the city, we'll have to determine what fiscal year we can begin and what that would look like.
Ted, there was a proposal, a presentation.
Our state of streets meeting?
5
joint-
years ago.
Oh,
before, where it was laid out like a 10-year for us to be able to, and what we would need to spend, and there was like a fast track and a.
Yeah, that's on this slide. If Liana, can you jump back like six, maybe 5, 6 slides?
that
There's a bunch
went-
of tables.
That was put together.
This one. Yeah, so this is under the 2020 plan. This is like, you know, if you're gonna spend 3.5 million a year or 3 million a year or 2.3 million a year, this is how long it takes. But you know, this doesn't include utility replacements that are required, water, sewer. It doesn't it's a good model. But there's a lot of other factors to consider. Doesn't really consider concrete work.
Ted, do you plan on bringing this back to the commission?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is
yeah.
just,
This is just you to take a
Okay,
initial look
preview.
at. Yeah. So please take a look at the map and come up with your questions. We'll revisit this.
Okay.
I think that's it.
all right. So any question on the project status? List?
Just a quick question about the zones. There hasn't been any decision on like what zones are going first or any.
Not only that, there hasn't been any decision about whether we should even have zones. So yeah, it's very preliminary.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
Yeah, draw lots. Commissioner Hughes.
I just really, I know we don't have any time. 2 quick questions. One on the Arroyo Fest, Golden Streets. We're only a month away, basically. Do we know how we're setting up, what we're doing, what we're offering? When are we really going to start publicizing? It's only like a month away.
It's been well publicized. We have, you know, over 2,000 runners that will attend that event. There's a lot of information out there. It's mostly planned out. Traffic control pretty much set. Yeah, a lot of publicization. Will be at our city council next week to finalize the agreement that we have with San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. We have a plan for what the street will look like and a stage and fun zones for kids and all sorts of stuff. So but I can share more materials on that if you'd like.
And the last question is, I know it was listed here, and I know the city council approved the second crossing guard that we're going forward. I know that this commission had come up with some suggestions of other safety mitigations. So I guess the question is, do we need a time frame to know as we go into the next fiscal budget that could be budgeted, planned, can be brought up for discussion, so we don't end up with, oh, we have no time, we've budgeted, we're just going to do the same thing. So that we properly, plan now to look at, because there were some things that we looked at, and I don't want to get lost and fall through the cracks, because I want the council to have enough time and opportunity to look at some of those alternatives, or if we say we're going to do this, but we're going to budget for this going forward.
Sure. So not having any direction from council to do anything at that location specifically, and with a number of the recommendations more of a capital improvement item, we're rolling a lot of that stuff into what will start on Monday, which is the Huntington Drive charrette process. If there's anything outstanding that we can do with, sort of like our neighborhood traffic management type stuff that's kind of minor here and there, we're going to try to capture that as a new project to do. But we're trying to basically split that up. So we want to close out the crossing guard evaluation part of it and take whatever's left and sort of piecemeal it out to the capital side or to the sort of local.
So it will be part of your discussion though, when you talk about Huntington and the.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're providing that
Okay.
report to the planning consultant.
Thank you.
Commissioner Avelson,
Nothing.
Commissioner Fisher.
I'll just say it's now good to see that some of the projects that we've been discussing for some time, been budgeting, been planning, been designing, are starting to get it implemented. And so it's a pleasure to see that happen. In particular, the school loading zone next to the high school and the slow streets on the residential streets. So it's great to see that. Before I came to the meeting, I quickly looked at my messages and I saw some communication from a management analyst whose name I don't recognize, asking if half of us could attend part of the Huntington, Fair Oaks, Fremont meeting on Tuesday and one on Wednesday. I really didn't understand what that's about. Do you know
Sure.
anything
So
about
just
that?
to clarify, we are engaging, multiple departments to try to undergo this effort because it's a lot of work. So we had the city manager's office help us try to schedule. We have a long list of stakeholder groups that we want to, besides people just sort of showing up and participating, we're trying to specifically schedule stakeholder groups that we want their feedback. We can't schedule MTech together without violating the Brown Act. So we basically broken up MTech into two groups to try to get feedback on the project if you're available. If not, then it's no problem because we'll have another session in October that will actually our next October meeting will be a part of that shred process. So October 17th, we'll have
Okay.
the shred consultant here.
Because I thought she said the purpose was to meet the consultant. Is that the purpose of the?
Yeah, the
Okay.
purpose is to meet the consultant and just, the consultant would go, we have basically maps of the corridors and it's an opportunity to sort of highlight issues that should be incorporated into the project. So if we give specific feedback, like, the Huntington and Fremont intersection, it's an opportunity to provide comments on that and get it incorporated into the planning process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ted, for the update. And with that, we'll go to city council communications. I saw you'll have a council meeting tomorrow night, so we wanted you to get your money's worth tonight.
Okay, I can keep this real quick. First of all, last night we had a special council meeting. We're not having a meeting tomorrow night. And let me back up a little bit. Number one, I'd like to offer my apologies to the commission for arriving as late as I did. Try not to make that happen again. And now going to last night's special meeting. Basically, it was a public meeting to get the public input into the main items that are going on with the general plan, specific downtown Pacific plan, possible height changes, okay, possible zoning changes, and housing element. And this was discussed last night. It was well attended. Got a lot of comments. And one of the things came out of that was some errors found in the housing element that need to be changed, discovered in time. They will be changed shortly. I'll get into that in a few seconds. And the meeting was, instead of being adjourned, it was postponed to the next meeting. A continuation of last night goes to September 27th. And basically the same subjects will be continued until then. And we want to get more public input. We got a lot. We need more. We'll take as much as available. And we'll go from there. We'll have one more of these public meetings in October. I don't have the exact date. I want to jump to the previous week because that would have been the last council meeting. And at that meeting, the dominant topic was the golf course. And basically the proposal for upgrades pertaining to the golf course, miniature golf course, etc. That was a very well attended meeting. And we had a lot of comments. I'm kind of chuckling because the housing element and height limits, that was attended. The meeting on the golf course was very well attended. There were an awful lot of comments. We probably could have taken comments for a couple of hours longer, not to mention the stack I have on my computer. And what I got out of it, I think the other council people did, was everybody wanted improvement to the golf course, but they didn't want change. So where that's going is that we need to meet again as with the commission ad hoc committee and go over. We had hired a consultant to give us the proposal. They did an excellent job on the proposal, but the population seems to like the golf course, very much likes it, and wants to keep it the way it was. That's probably not going to happen, but a lot more discussion. We can come up with we'll come up with a compromise. So I think that's it for what I have to say tonight. And any questions?
Thank you, Councilmember Donovan. Commissioner Communications, Commissioner Hughes.
First, I want to acknowledge and thank all the residents that came tonight to talk about Orange Grove. And I know that we still are dealing with other fatalities and dangerous accidents that occurred, like on Huntington. And the one I'm going to get on my little soapbox and just ask if we could get materials a bit sooner, because getting the minutes really with not a lot of turnaround time, getting 500 pages in less than 5 hours to get through it, and the update as well. It would be nice to get it sooner. Then we could be more thoughtful and spend more time really reviewing and looking back and making sure that we're doing our jobs properly.
Sure, apologies on that. Minutes will come sooner. That 500-page ITERRAS report was intended to be released on Thursday. We didn't realize it wasn't part of the package until someone told us today. It just didn't get compiled. And then as far as the project stats just being released today, we just had, we don't have David here. And so we're short in terms of our resources to get it done.
So I also want to, on the other side of that, compliment the presentations tonight and also the addition of the budget information to the update form. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Abelson.
Thank you. I'm going to try to do this in a minute or less. I want to echo Vice Chair Hughes's comments on all fronts. To point out that over the past couple of days, there have been 2 more accidents on Orange Grove, one at Oliver and one at Prospect. So it continues to be a concern. Next, thank you to staff and particularly Ted for getting that loading zone in front of the high school. I've sat there and witnessed it a couple of times in operation, and I think it's quite successful. There could be some room for improvement, but I think it's a great step forward. Last, thank you to the police department. One of the Grand Avenue commenters at our prior meeting expressed concern about a failure to respect a stop sign on Charter Oak at Grand. Charter Oak is one of the many streets used as a cut through. I passed the message on the police department, and they were out there enforcing. So thank you to them for that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher.
I thought we were on this agenda item when I spoke before, so I have nothing further to say.
Commissioner Zavala.
Yeah, just a little bit more of a comment just on like interactions that I've had with the community regarding slow streets projects, since I have been helping with installations and stuff like that and repairs. So just like probably just 2 things I'll keep it to. The first thing is that when they were first installed, some of the delineators were installed on top of a line tape. So like this tape would be down and then the delineator on top by using the heat pad. And that was okay, but of course that meant that the constitution of the adhesion was compromised. So if a car went over it, then it would lift up the tape too. And that would also like lead to like a bigger damage, right? And then that with combination of the tropical storm hurricane that we had to kind of led to like a lot of the visual damage at the first like couple weeks, like I think first 2 or 3 weeks. So but ever since then there's been like an adjustment. Of course, all the repairs past that point were done in a way where that the heat pad would be not on top of the tape. Then the tape also, we had some breaks in between so that if there's a little bit of lifting on the tape, it won't pull up the entire thing. But yeah, for the most part, that's just one thing. And then also the switch over to the new pads. It's been also working out pretty good because we also don't have to rely on the torch either. So that's good too. But yeah, for the most part, I think that's it about that. Second thing that I was going to say about slow streets was lost it. All right, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Zavella, and thanks for putting your hard work and, and actually going out there and helping install those things and volunteering and, that's, appreciate you doing that. I have no communications, just thank you, Public Works. You are a lean but mighty team, and we appreciate all you do for the city. Thank you, Ted. And with that, I'll turn it over to you if you have any comments.
Just the one comment about the outreach sessions. We'll be have the Kashrets process next week. So we'll be at the South Pasadena Community Library basically all day from Monday through Thursday. If you want to look at when you can come in, we've got it posted on our website. We'll also be sending postcards to all of the residents and businesses along those corridors. And please join us. So thank you very much.
So I'm sorry, what are the times though, each night?
Sure. So on Monday night, we'll be having a presentation. I think it's I'm having a mind blank. It's around 6 o'clock
It
something.
is 6 to 7:45,
Thank you.
and then
Open house.
Thursday, 6 to 7:45.
So those are the presentations, and I think is there an open house scheduled on there too?
Is that Open Studio?
Yeah, open studio. Sorry.
Open Studio 1, Tuesday, 9/26, 4 to 6 p.m. Open Studio number 2, Tuesday, October 17th, 4 to 6 p.m.
Thanks, Chair Donovan.
And there is a flyer, I believe, on the city's Facebook page if you want to check it out there. But thanks, everyone. It is 10:05, and I'll call the meeting adjourned.